and welcome once again to Little Africa Bronx News Mayoral Candidates Forum. Yay! It's Super Bowl Sunday, and we appreciate all of you taking the time out of watching the Super Bowl to be with us this evening. We thank you very much for that. Again, my name is Mohammed Mardah. I'm the chairman of the African Advisory Council here in the Bronx, and I'm also the CEO of the Africans Help Desk, which is one of the co-sponsors of tonight's forum. So once again, thank you very much. You know, this is critical times we are in, and I think New Yorkers deserve to hear from, you know, our leaders who will lead us into the next century, if you will. So we appreciate all of you being here, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas and policies that would help move New York City forward. So on that note, I want to throw it back to Mona to give us the run of the show, and we can start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mardah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Meimuna Davids. I am the founder and publisher of LittleAfrica BronxNews. LittleAfrica BronxNews is a project of social impact strategies. Just to give you some background, I was born in South Africa, raised in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I've been here for almost 40 years. I'm still very proudly African, very proudly South African. And that's why, as an African here in New York City, and now a Brooklyn transplant in Co-op City, it's important for me, for Mr. Mardah and other African community leaders, that our community becomes more civically engaged. And that is the impetus for LittleAfrica BronxNews. LittleAfrica BronxNews' civic engagement initiative, Meet the Candidate, as well as these candidate forums, is geared to inform and educate our community about the candidates running for office. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that you know, this municipal election this year is critical, especially considering the devastation that COVID-19 has wrought on our great city. I'm joined today by Maimuna Davids, who is the Communications Director for Social Impact Strategies. She can introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well in the snow. As Mona said, my name is Maimuna Davids. I am the Communications Director and Editor for both LittleAfrica BronxNews and Social Impact Strategies.
Thank you. And she's the one that puts all of this together. So, you know, kind of free labor, because that is my baby girl.
That's how you can get away with the child labor, as if it's your child.
Yeah, my son shoveled the sidewalk this morning.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
But as you know, with the last time with our Brooklyn Borough President's Candidates Forum, we had Wahira Mardah here, and as we said, typical Africans, we make our children work. Everybody in the family has to do their part. So with the introductions done, I just want to go over the run of show for our viewers watching. So the forum is from 5:30 to 8:30, and we've divided the forum into two parts. Each part is 90 minutes. We have group one, group two. Group one, as you can see, that will be with us until 7 o'clock, is Mr. R. Chang, Ms. Dianne Morales, Ms. Maya Wiley, and Mr. Scott Stringer. We are also joined by Umar Konde, who is a high school senior at Capital Prep Harlem High School, who will be asking the candidates some education and youth-related questions. Each candidate has 3 minutes to introduce themselves. Throughout the forum, each candidate will also have 3 minutes to answer the questions. We do have a cross-question round where each candidate could choose one candidate, a candidate of their choosing, and ask them a question. And then we will close. Each candidate will have 2 minutes at the end of the forum for their closing remarks and to, tell us again why we should vote for them as our new mayor. With that being said, I want to welcome everyone for joining us this evening. I know it's Super Bowl Sunday, but we greatly appreciate you engaging our communities. And I will hand things over to Mr. Mardah, who will start with the first topic. Thank you.
Sir, I do believe you are muted.
Oh, sorry, before I forget, Maimuna is also our timekeeper. Can you please explain how we're keeping time?
Yes. So every candidate will have 3 minutes to answer your question. I will start the timer when you begin speaking, which will usually begin after you say thank you, because I know a lot of people often say thank you for the question. I'll start your time after that. And then at the 30-second mark, when you have 30 seconds left, I will raise a 3 to give you a heads up. And then if your time ends, I will hold up a T for time.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Mardah?
Thank you very much, Maimuna. So we would just go around. Each candidate would introduce themselves. You have 3 minutes. So it will follow this order: Art, Chang, Dianne Morales, Ms. Maya Wiley, and Mr. Scott Stringer. That will be the order of introduction. So, Mr. Chang, you have 3 minutes of introduction.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you so much, Mona. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to do quick shout outs to my friends in Co-op City and African Diaspora, Kazembe, Nicole, and Musa. I hope you're watching. Nice to see you. My name is Art Chang. I'm running to be your next mayor. You may not have heard of me yet, but you will, because I will become the next mayor. For 40 years, I've been doing the work, not talking about the work. I have worked to improve nearly every aspect of our city for more than 30 years, and I will do it next from City Hall. I have 30 years of working for the public good. The city's Corporation Counsel's office, the state's Urban Development Corporation, working on Queens West, Safe Horizon, the Brooklyn Public Library, CUNY, the city's Corporation Council, the city's Campaign Finance Board, where I served on 9 years. And I was the first chair of its Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. And most recently, I was chair of my son's school leadership team at Brooklyn Tech. In parallel, I have over 40 years of working in the private sector, starting off in music, and then in museum and exhibit design. I've worked in every job in a restaurant, and I've worked in architecture, in government, and I have an MBA in finance, which led me to working in investment banking. And then I was in technology. So I created my first technology company in 1998, and I was here at the dawn of the technology startup era in New York City. And I started over a dozen companies focused on primarily in the arts and related to technology. Our city is standing at the edge of a precipice. We have interconnected crises for COVID, the eviction crisis, homelessness, and the shortage of truly affordable housing. So I have to ask why. Why is our government top-down, siloed, not coordinated, in conflict with itself and with Albany? Why do we have a one-size-fits-all approach to everything that's punitive and reactive? Our city budget has grown by over $20 billion in the last 8 years, and yet we don't seem to have enough money for things. Can we solve today's problems with the same thinking used to create them? The city needs a different perspective and experience. My parents came to the United States from Korea as students when immigration from Asia was severely curtailed. I was born in Jim Crow Atlanta, and I grew up in an all-white school district in Akron, Ohio. I went to Yale, and I was the second man to graduate with a women's studies degree. I've learned how to make the most of what I've been given, both the good and the bad, to successfully forge ahead. I will transform our city to work for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Art. Ms. Morales?
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dianne Morales. I've spent over 25 years working to meet the needs of New Yorkers when our systems have failed, most recently in the South Bronx for almost a decade. New York City is a part of who I am. I'm from here, I've taught here, I raised my children here, and I have organized right here in the city. Through all of this, I've experienced failed systems, but also the hope of our communities. And it's that combination that led me to enter this race. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic compounded the pre-existing pandemics of racism and poverty that already plagued so many New Yorkers. And as we watched Wall Street and the stock market get stronger, our already weak systems created an even deeper inequity within our schools, our health facilities, and our neighborhoods. The problem is not money. Our city has the resources. The problem is our priorities. How administration after administration, out of touch with our communities, continues to fail to address the root causes of the barriers to a dignified life. The next mayor has to have a clear vision in defending and protecting human rights, the rights of Black and Brown communities. This means protecting the livelihood of all New Yorkers. I am a first-generation Puerto Rican born and raised in Bed-Stuy to a working class family. I am also the single mother of 2 children who has been a successful executive and leader of human service organizations that have been dedicated to helping others navigate challenges and access opportunity to live in dignity. I co-founded a national organization in early childhood literacy that's been in existence for 27 years and operates in 14 states. I created an education program that has been replicated across every publicly funded after-school program in New York City. And I launched a career training program in healthcare that exceeded national promotion and retention rates. I'm honored to be here with all of you today, and I look forward to having a conversation about my vision for the city. My vision is inspired by the people, with the people, and for the people. I'm not here to get us back to the status quo. I'm running for mayor to co-create an equitable city that we have never experienced, but one that we all deserve. One that will finally live up to the rhetoric of being the greatest city in the world. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ms. Morales. Ms. Wiley.
Thank you, and it is a pleasure to be here, and I apologize in advance that I have another engagement and will have to leave you at 6:30, but I'm grateful for this opportunity. And let me just start by saying I'm running to be the next mayor of New York City because I know this is a city where we can all live with dignity, and dignity means many things, but when I say all, I mean no matter what we look like. I mean, no matter where we were born. I mean, no matter how we worship, whether we have a big bank account or small bank account, whether we live in luxury housing or public housing. And that is something that has not been a reality. And it's one of the reasons that I spent 30 years of my career as a civil rights lawyer, doing everything from working at the ACLU on education funding and getting more into our schools as someone who went to a segregated public school that was all Black, overcrowded and underfunded when I was young, to also trying to keep and suing to keep maternal and childcare beds in Harlem when St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center was trying to move them down to Columbus Circle. But I also had the tremendous privilege of going to South Africa and living there off and on for almost 2 years to help set up a criminal justice initiative. And I learned so much there. And one of the reasons it was a privilege is because I knew we had much to learn in the United States from those from other countries, particularly ones that fought so hard for liberation. And, you know, the word I learned, not just as a word, but as something that had deep meaning around what we had to do with one another, for one another, was Ubuntu. And that is dignity, right? And that unless we see ourselves in each other and recognize that we all must thrive, that we only survive if it is all of us, that is something critical to this city. And I spent 25 years litigating, lobbying Congress, and doing many other things. It was policy advocacy, including founding the Center for Social Inclusion, where we worked on dismantling structural racism and bringing communities together to fight for better policies. But I went into City Hall in 2014 because, not that I knew Bill de Blasio, but I did know that city government touches all of our lives and everything in it, and has the opportunity to create the kind of dignity we did not yet have, particularly in communities of color. And I saw firsthand that it was true, and I was fortunate that I had the opportunity to show city government how to get every single unit in Queensbridge houses free broadband. But I also saw how the yellow brick road can become the red brick wall. And it does require a leadership that is willing to listen and learn and partner in leadership, and so that we are actually not just recovering from COVID, but reimagining the city so we all have dignity in it. And I look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wiley. Mr. Stringer?
Well, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Mona. I'm really glad to be here tonight with the community to talk about the ways in which we can bring the economy back together. I don't have to tell all of you listening tonight, but COVID was the great discriminator. And when you think about the challenges of unemployment in communities of color, when you think about the challenges in the Bronx, we are at a point where we are literally recovering from the Great Depression. We saw people losing their homes and their jobs. We saw people who were dying in hospitals because of pre-existing health conditions. We must have a mayor who has the vision and the skills to not just bring the economy back, to bring it back differently so that we can invest in all of our communities. I've developed a detailed plan to bring back small business, to create real affordable housing, to create workforce development for our young people, and to reimagine the child care system in the city. But plans aren't enough. It's going to take real government and political skills to get things done. As controller, I've managed the 4th largest public pension fund in the United States, $240 billion. It's the 14th largest pension fund in the world. So I've protected the retirement security of so many of you over the last 8 years. But I've also leveraged that pension fund to insist that we put more people of color on corporate boards, both in the C-suite and at the corporate board level. I've worked with the Taxi Workers Alliance on a plan to deliver debt relief to taxi drivers who have been standing up for immigrant workers who were cheated out of prevailing wages. And those are the values and the issues I've fought for my entire career. And I will say this to all of you. We know that there's power in numbers. You know, as of 2017, there's an estimated 148,000 African-born New Yorkers in the city. We have partnered together, not because I'm running for mayor, because I've represented the community for 8 years as controller. And when you think about African New Yorkers, well, they come from 54 African countries. And there are large communities from Senegal and Ghana and Ivory Coast and Ethiopia and Liberia. And I know that this community wants what so many other communities want, which is hope for the next generation and for the kids. And I want you to know, as a parent of 2 kids in public school, a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, we have got to make sure that every child comes back stronger post-pandemic academically. And I'm going to put my experience to work, not just as controller, but as a borough president, as a former assembly member. And I will concentrate on bringing back our small immigrant businesses. 2,800 small businesses have closed. We've lost 520,000 workers in the small business sector. So I'm ready to go to work. I'm ready on day one. This is not going to be a mayoralty on training wheels. This is going to be a mayor with a specific plan who knows how to get things done in Albany and in the city. And we're going to make a city hall that actually delivers on the promises made. And by the way, let me just say, Mohammed, like Maya, I do have to leave at 6:30 as well because of a family situation. So I thank you for your patience.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So we will just jump right into it since the 2 of you have to leave a little bit early. So the question now goes to you, Scott. You just mentioned COVID. So what is your post-COVID recovery plan? And what are your top 3 priorities? The last question is, you know, our community has been hit really hard with the virus. And as history has it, you know, we are the least likely to get any government assistance, quickly. So what policies, investments are you ready to implement to help, our communities?
Well, let me say this. I know firsthand the pain that COVID has brought. I lost my mother to COVID in April. She was a Bronx resident, very proud. She was a single mom who raised two boys, and to me, she was the strongest woman in the world. And she died at the age of 86, and she had pre-existing health conditions. But I remember the conversation I had with her doctor the night she died. And the doctor said to me, you have to understand this is not just a virus that is killing older people with pre-existing health conditions. In the Bronx, this virus is killing people of color, Black people in their 50s, Latino people in their 40s, people suffering from diabetes, type 2 diabetes and asthma. And the reason that they have been suffering, and the reason this was exposed, because government made bad decisions. We put bus depot stations and peaker plants, and all of the environmental racist projects went to communities where so many of communities of color live. We have to change that. And the way we change that is to reimagine budget priorities, to start moving the money and the programs to make sure that we deconstruct the environmental racism that has been pervasive around our city. And that's going to take reimagining the economy, but it's also going to think about how we deal with the post-COVID world. First and foremost, not running for mayor, but just being controller. I've said to the Blasio administration, get your act together. We have got to inoculate all communities. And I demanded data to show how we are coping with COVID based on race and community. No surprise, white people are getting the vaccine at a much higher rate than people of color. That has to change. I said we should take the contact tracers and reinvest those efforts into communities. We have to align the Department of Health with the H&H hospital system. That hasn't been done. And I will promise all of you that as controller, not as a mayoral candidate taking office a year from now, I will continue to hold this de Blasio administration accountable to making sure that we bring back people by getting the vaccinations into the arms of as many people as possible. And the way to do that is to work with stakeholders around the city. But ultimately, there are three crises we have to address. There's a social justice crisis, there's an economic crisis, and there is a healthcare crisis. And we can't open the economy the same way we closed it. It's going to take a different investment strategy as mayor of New York City.
You're muted, Mohammed.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Stringer. So next, same question, Ms. Wiley.
Yeah, look, one thing that is so outrageous is the fact that we have seen so many hard hit by COVID, having lost more than 3/4 of those who've died from the disease have been in Black community, have been in the Bronx, have been in central Brooklyn and the North Shore of Staten Island. And we saw then that there was a problem even in getting the tests and getting protective gear. And that's something that we should have been prepared for. And if I was mayor, first of all, we would not be having this vaccine distribution crisis, because we would have anticipated what we already knew even before COVID hit, which is who didn't have internet access to be able to get online to sign up for an appointment. And we would have had the partnerships with community-based organizations, because we need culturally appropriate care, and we need folks who speak other languages to have services in languages they speak. And that includes our faith-based partners as well as not-for-profit partners. That would have been a better way to ensure penetration. And I would have had a geographic approach to where the problem was worse. And that's what I will do if we have not solved this when I become mayor. But the economic recovery is also job one. And it has to focus on places like the Bronx as well, because we know that so much of the hunger, So much of the lost jobs and wages, so much of what was already the poorest borough practically in the country, not just in the city, that was something that required investment. So I have a plan called New Deal New York, and we will invest $10 billion in capital construction, and we will do that in communities that are hard hit. We will have local hiring targets. We will also have women and minority-owned business enterprise goals and ensure that we're generating economic activity for the community in the community. But I'll tell you one other thing, that the projects themselves have to solve community problems. And so that means we will partner with communities, with community-based leaders on the kinds of projects that solve them. For example, like we've heard that in Southeast Queens, they need a community center. We know we need to have affordable housing needs. Those are the kinds of things we can build. And one last thing, when we talk about our communities that are foreign-born or low income, too often 600,000 of us don't have health insurance. And that is something I'm working on with experts on right now. And in a few weeks, we will have a proposal that helps to change that, because an insurance card is part of what we need, even no matter what other papers we have or don't have. And that's what I will do.
Thank you very much. Ms. Morales?
Thank you so much. So let me start off by reminding you all, I spent the last decade working in the Bronx. I have been in the community with Bronxites for 10 years, building solutions and strategies to help overcome the inequities and injustices economically, on the housing front, on the education front. I created a pipeline to healthcare careers for young adults that exceeded national promotion and retention rates. I spent the last decade building these alternatives, but the reality of it is that the systems within which we're working are fundamentally and structurally racist and oppressive. And until we're ready to address that head on, acknowledge that head on, and dismantle those systems, we are simply going to be putting a Band-Aid over the existing problems. So here's what we need to do in terms of COVID. The first thing we need to do is to actually acknowledge that COVID has had a disproportionate impact on Black and Brown communities, on the folks that have been doing the work to keep the city operating and making it possible for the privileged to stay home during this crisis. We need to do that by paying people to stay home, because the reality of it is that too many community members do not feel secure enough to stay home because they're concerned about providing for their families. That also means that we need to cancel rent and address the homelessness crisis in our city, because again, the homelessness crisis also disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities. And we know that we can't separate housing from public health or public safety. So we need to actually meet the human crisis with a human response. The second thing we need to do while we're making it possible for people to stay safely at home is to prioritize the rollout of the vaccine in a way that prioritizes and centers the communities that have been the most disproportionately impacted. And that means partnering with community-based organizations and trusted, credible messengers, because we know that our communities do not trust in our city government, because our city government has failed us far too many times. So we need credible messengers to do outreach, to do education. We need to be doing that in a linguistically and culturally relevant and appropriate way so that everyone has access to it. And we need to prioritize those communities. Also, we need to then think about the economic recovery, and the economic recovery needs to prioritize our small and local businesses. For too long, we have centered our economy on large corporations and big businesses that come in, exploit our labor, and extract wealth from our communities. So we actually need to invest in and prioritize our local businesses, because we know that they're in fact responsible for employing almost 50% of our workforce. And by doing that, we can begin the path to economic recovery and building a local economy that prioritizes our residents and our neighbors first. So that's how I would begin to address the challenge.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Morales. Ms. Chan?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I want to ask 3 questions. The first one is, what is our view on what is going to happen with COVID? The second one is, how do we stop the situation from getting worse? And then the third is, how do we use our knowledge about the interconnected problems to bring the city back? Because we can't answer the question that you asked without actually presenting a theory of how we're going to return. And I would say right off the bat that it's not like flipping a switch, that the prevalent way that we're talking about it in the media is if it's going to magically go away at the end of this year, and in the fall is what lots of people are saying. And that even if we get vaccinations to everybody, will we actually be able to come back? Because the virus will still be with us, and it will be mutating, and it will have variants. We have students. So we need to actually figure out how we're going to come back, assuming that COVID is not going away right away. The second thing is, how do we stop the problems from happening that are causing our community so much pain? We have all the data. We know where all the people are who have issues, who are the most vulnerable, who have comorbidities. We know where to reach them. We know where the elderly are. So why aren't we reaching them? Why don't we have more of a bottom-up approach, taking what we already know and organizing it from the bottom up instead of trying to come from the top down? The third thing is we need to be able to deal with what's happening with education. So going back to housing for a second. So we need to stop the evictions. I have a plan to do that. And I also have a plan to keep small businesses in their stores, because that's the social fabric of our city. And we're going to do that by addressing mortgages, because mortgages are the tail wagging the dog. And unless we deal with mortgages, we're not going to come up with a solution that will allow people to vacate the debt that they've built up. On education, we have so many students before COVID who had problems, right? We had 300,000 students who had an IEP. We have 30,000 students right now who are homeless. We have over 10,000 students in juvenile detention. And then we have the hundreds of thousands of other students who are having difficulty learning because they don't have universal broadband, they don't have the internet, and they may not actually be mentally prepared to actually learn online. So we need to solve that problem. And it's not going to happen overnight. Why don't all of our systems adapt to us instead of expecting us to adapt to them? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. So back to Mona for the next round of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Mardah. So the next round of questioning is with regards to healthcare. And of course, the situation that we are all dealing with, the pandemic. I want to first start off with, oh, what happened? Okay, I thought my internet just went down. Almost had a heart attack. Okay, so starting with this pandemic and the rollout of the vaccines. And I actually have a personal story on this here that just happened today with my family. We are in Co-op City. We've read the articles, Washington Heights, on how a woman in Washington Heights, senior citizen, couldn't get the vaccine because people from Westchester had already come to get the vaccine. Now we have more vaccination sites, including the site at Yankee Stadium that opened last week, which is fantastic. But, for example, my 74-year-old mother, who is in Co-op City, called me today and she said, I cannot get an appointment. I tried with Bartow. There's no appointments. My mother was hospitalized for 9 days at Montefiore. We can't get her an appointment. This is real. This is impacting families. I will be on the phone tomorrow trying to get an appointment. So if I'm sitting here with you candidates and my mother, and I can get my 74-year-old mother that was hospitalized for 9 days with COVID-19 and appointments even at Bartow across the street, we have a problem here. This system, this appointment system itself is not working, and our most vulnerable New Yorkers, our parents, our grandparents, others with underlying conditions, it's like navigating some crazy bureaucratic labyrinth. We need to do better. So my question is, considering that so many communities of color, particularly in the Bronx, it seems like the Bronx is the home for essential workers. It's pretty much a version of ground zero. How are you, whether, you know, now today as candidates running for mayor, what do you plan, how do you plan on assisting and pushing to ensure that our most vulnerable workers, our essential workers, those who are on the front lines, in addition to our senior citizens, get access, that this system is streamlined? Because we shouldn't have to go to different NYC, SOMOS, this, that. It's not working. So my question to you is, how are you going to advocate to ensure that New Yorkers get access to this vaccine instead of people from Long Island coming all the way to Co-op and people from Westchester County coming all the way to Washington Heights? And I will start first with Ms. Wiley.
Well, first of all, let me say that is a horrific story, and I'm so sorry that your family has had to suffer that, and it's unacceptable. And it starts with something I already said, which was, one, we already saw the problems with the testing. And some of this is so easy to solve if we have the right partnerships. So for example, you know, we have home health aides. Home health aides are essential workers. They go into folks' home to take care of people who are also vulnerable to the disease. And we actually do know how to reach them, because many of them are actually working in agencies, and they could be sites for ensuring that those employees are getting vaccinated. First, they're often women of color, they're often older, and they live in our communities. But the other is to partner with the religious institutions. I was just at a church this morning, which in 2 days because there was a problem with getting COVID test access, finally got the city to agree to give them some tests. They got 500 people tested in 2 days, because it's a church community. It reaches its neighbors. It reaches the folks in the community. Imagine doing that with mosques. Imagine doing that with also other community-based partners. And the other thing, and we've seen this happen in some other cities that have done it better, is they didn't privilege folks who could sign up online, because so many low-income people of color can't get online. And so they had other ways in which they could ensure that they had a geographic focus, that folks who walked in who could just simply show something that demonstrated they live nearby could actually just get the vaccine. So there are all kinds of different, it's not a one size fits all. It's being creative, and it's actually having a plan in advance. Because here's the other thing. We knew months ago we were going to have a vaccine. We knew months ago we were going to need a distribution system that was better than what we did for testing. And we could have been working and identifying all those partnerships, asking what folks need, setting them up, and having discussions that focused in the hardest hit communities first, so that we were ensuring that there was equity in the distribution. And that's what I would have done.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley. Ms. Morales?
Hi, thank you. So in the human services field, we have an expression that's called no wrong door. In essence, what that means is that wherever someone goes for help, whatever their issue is, we're going to meet them where they are, and we're going to provide them with the help and the support that they need. And so New York City needs to adopt a no wrong door approach. We should vastly be expanding the resources as to where people can go to get the vaccine. It should be available at every drugstore. It should be available at every community center. It should be available at every religious institution. We should be vaccinating 24/7. We should have mobile units that come to the community, because we should actually be vaccinating seniors in their homes and minimizing the need for them to leave their homes during these times. Particularly, there's the public health issue, but then there's also the weather outside. They should not have to navigate the inclement weather in order to be protected and to be safe. We should make sure that all of our educators have the information about this and all of the essential workers know. We should also have a system that combines and blends the need for appointments with just open access, so that there's equal access half of the day or half of whatever, a blending of that, so that people who have access to technology can do that, but also that those that don't have a period and a window of time where they too are able to walk in and get access. We should be doing everything in our power to increase and expand access and make it as easy as possible and make it as local as possible for folks to be able to get the vaccine. And we should be prioritizing those that need it the most, those who are the most vulnerable, and making it really easy for them to access what they need. That's what I think we should be doing.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Mr. Chang?
Thank you for the question. And Mona, I'm so sorry to hear about the troubles that you're having with your mother. She obviously has a pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
She also obviously has a primary physician. And when we look at what's gone wrong, it goes back to that same top-down versus bottoms-up. The governor and the mayor have basically made hospitals the center point for distribution, which has caused bottlenecks at those points. The second, if we know doctors' offices and pharmacies know who their patients are. Why aren't we actually using those as points of distribution? We know that the two states that are the most successful in delivering vaccinations have been South Dakota and West Virginia, because they have done exactly that. They have partnered with the small pharmacies throughout their states to deliver the vaccine. Now, the state's responsibility and the city's responsibility is really in supply and demand management, supply chain management. We don't know when this supply is coming. It's coming in batches, it's coming in bulky numbers, but we know where all the demand is. So the state's responsibility and the city's responsibility is to make those matches and to use the existing channels to proactively inform people that they are up next, and to know how to contact them and have them have a secondary person in case they can't be contacted, so that this medicine can be delivered to the right place at the right time, and they can show up there. And for folks who are elderly or who have comorbidities that cause them to be, risk exposure to anything, well, then someone should know, and we should be able to deliver that vaccine right in their home. We have all the data. This is a question of imagination, but we're not recreating the wheel. UPS and FedEx managed to deliver billions of packages to the right place at the right time in a way where everybody can track it. So why can't government? We're letting down the people who we serve.
Indeed, Mr. Chang. Mr. Stringer?
Well, let me tell you what I'm doing as your elected official right now. First, I was the elected official who said to the mayor, let's get going. We knew the virus took us by surprise, but as Maya mentioned, absolutely right, we knew there was a vaccine coming almost from the beginning of the virus, and we certainly knew that by November. The fact that the City Hall administration couldn't organize a 2-car funeral has put people in harm's way. And so what I said, first, let's get the demographic information made public so we could do better strategy. I was able to get that done working with public advocate Jumaane Williams. We found when the data was released that just 11% of the New Yorkers vaccinated were Black, 50% Asian, 19% Latino, and 48% white. So there has also been a moral management failure as well. I developed a specific equitable rollout. I call it Fair Shot NYC. We would implement a single functional online city platform, not 3 websites that crash. Mona, your story is a story I get every morning starting around 6 a.m. from somebody who's in their 40s and 50s, very educated, good people. They know how to navigate a website. They're not calling for themselves, they're calling for their mom and their dad, the grandparents. They cannot get their parents vaccinated. It's mind-boggling how city government has dropped the ball. We have got to change the protocols here. And I'm going to get City Hall to do it. We have to also establish a supply chain management task force. We've got to track and redistribute the vaccine supplies in real time. So there are some sites that are doing well, some sites are struggling, and we have got to deal with that. Also, let's talk about these contact tracers. Where are they? What are they doing? Let's make them vaccine workers and get into the communities, the churches, the community-based organizations. Let's engage this as well. This has been the challenge from the beginning. And while we saw testing ramp up slowly and expand, we all wish it had been done faster, but we understand the challenges. This was ready-made for this city to set the tone for the rest of the country. Now, with the glass half full, I do believe that Biden is going to increase the doses up 16%. I think with Moderna, Pfizer, and now with J&J getting a one-shot approval, which I think will come, I don't know, in 2 weeks, we will be able to mobilize. But we're going to be stuck in a refrigerator, right, unless we get city government to focus. And as controller, I will work hand in hand with the mayor to make sure that we create a distribution point of action. They've already taken some of my recommendations, but we have to begin to do this. And that is some of the challenges that we face.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. And I will now pass it on to Mr. Mardah to continue with our housing topic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mona. Housing is really an issue, as most of you know. So, and we also know that when this eviction moratorium ends, there's going to be, the housing court is going to be flooded. You know, we know there's the right to counsel and other initiatives that's being put out there. But what are some of your plans to help offset some of these rent arrears that our communities are facing? And also, what is also your plan to ensure that, you know, people get to stay in their homes, don't lose their homes due to rent arrears? And also, how do we make affordable housing affordable? We know it's not affordable for a lot of our families here in the Bronx and indeed in the entire city of New York. So how do we make affordable housing affordable? And we will start with Mr. Stringer.
I believe that this is the crisis that has to be dealt with front and center. First of all, we need to make sure that we're able to cancel the rent for so many people who, no fault of their own, lost their job literally overnight. We have people who are struggling to put food on the table, and we're going to need not just to get the stimulus package, but to create a program with the banks, people who are holding mortgages, and our renters to create a program that forestalls evictions. That has to be centerpiece number one. But we also have to recognize that we have a housing crisis and a homeless crisis, and they're one and the same. The number of New Yorkers that are in shelter now is 59% higher than it was 10 years ago. This is before the pandemic. The city's approach has been to spend more and more to manage the symptoms of the housing crisis rather than attack the underlying cause. And I have a specific housing plan for the world to see that creates, for the first time in a generation, actual low-income housing. The mayor's plan over the last 8 years was to give away the land to developers who built quote unquote affordable housing, because the affordable housing Bronx residents, the affordable housing Bronx residents couldn't access. We built waterfront housing as luxury development, and then it was unaffordable for the rest. Let's change that. I want to access the vacant property in the city, at least 1,000 properties that the city owns, give that land back to the people, give that land to community-based organizations, redirect the 421A subsidy, meaning end that and redirect the subsidy for rewarding actual low-income housing. That's part one. Part two, when we talk about luxury as of right development, why are we giving away the land? Let's mandate that we set aside 25% affordable housing. We have a housing emergency. We have record numbers of people in our shelter system. It's time to take real bold action. And I will tell you, because I've crunched the numbers, I've done the data analysis, I can tell you that we not just have 60,000 people tonight sleeping in a shelter, half are children. Mohammed, there is 472,000 people who are one step away from homelessness. They make less than $40,000 a year, but we spend 7 years building housing for people who make 77,000 and above. I think, trying to remember the specifics of one data point in my housing plan, we built more housing for people making 150,000 a year, that's quote unquote affordable, than we have for people who are making under 40,000. My plan would just recreate a whole new housing plan. Now, lastly, can this be done? Mayor LaGuardia built public housing in the 1930s. He went to Roosevelt and got public housing done. That was the aspirational housing of that generation. Then we built the Mitchell-Ama housing program, right? And that was great middle-class housing from the Bronx to the Brooklyn to the Upper West Side, you name it. It was community-based housing. And Koch, during the financial abandonment, when people fled the city mistakenly, he gave the abandoned buildings back to the people. That's how the Bronx got housing. This mayor made a deal with the big developers. They just can't build affordable housing. They're not community-based organizations. Let's stop pretending that they can. If we do not have a holistic approach and we simply turn around and talk about it, we will not build it. And if we don't build it, we're going to be paying billions of dollars managing a broken system. And I want to change that.
Oh, thank you very much. Ms. Wiley, same question.
Yes, and this is so central because, as I said, my earliest experiences was losing my best friend in my whole neighborhood to displacement because people couldn't pay the rent when it went up. And it's a core reason why I'm running. And let's just start with the fact that I actually have an eviction moratorium plan out now. And I do a couple of things in that plan. I mean, one is to say we need a real eviction moratorium. And yes, we actually need a real rent subsidy structure to make sure people don't get put out of the homes they're in for the very reason that Scott said, because homelessness is actually an eviction crisis. That means it's an affordable housing crisis. We have to stop that. But also recognize in my plan that we have actually an issue with wealth building in communities of color. And a lot of our small landlords are people of color who've been building and trying to hold on, not wealthy people. So we actually build in a way to help landlords, small landlords, 1 to 5 buildings, that literally can create an agreement not to evict their tenants in exchange for some support and some tax abatements so they don't lose the property that they have to build wealth. That actually, we can do both things and not pit small landlords and tenants against each other. And the other thing is we do have to increase and have more support for legal services because it's been extremely effective at keeping folks in their apartments. But that's not enough. And we have the opportunity right now, because this crisis has created a vacancy crisis. That is an opportunity. So one is we have the opportunity to take some of this vacancy and negotiate it into more permanently affordable. And absolutely, we have to look at all bands of need. So very low and extremely low income people too. But we also have to buy up the 100 boarded hotels that are boarded up right now that we can make permanently affordable. We have to partner with not-for-profit developers as well. We have to look at the community land trust model. We have to do many things. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But here's the other thing. We, in our New Deal New York plan, also have $2 billion explicitly for NYCHA, because in addition to the other things we have to do to keep our public housing public and ensure that our tenants in public housing have a voice, we also have roughly 5,000 units a year that sit vacant as we have people who have need. So we would do all those things, and we actually will be putting out a formal housing proposal in the coming weeks. I want to close just quickly by thanking you for having me, because I'm coming up to the time I have to leave. I hope this is a first conversation and not a last conversation. I look forward to continuing it, because the BX is part of us, and we're going to come back together stronger, more fair, and more just. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate the time that you've given us, and hopefully, as you said, this will not be the last conversation. But so we will move on to Ms. Morales, and I'm sure Mona, you would agree with me before we go into the next round of questioning. Maybe we'll give Scott, a couple minutes to, since he also has to leave by 6:30. After Art answers the question, come back to Scott to just give us a couple of minutes. Marks, is that okay?
Thank you.
Is that okay, Scott? Because if you wanted to go now.
Oh, would you mind? That would be so nice. I'll be very brief, because I don't want to.
That's fine with me.
Thank you, Art, and I don't want to take away from your time. But let me just say to the community, as Maya mentioned, I hope that we can continue to have the dialogue. I've really been honored over the last, I guess, 7.5 years to represent the community, to be at the community events, to talk with community leaders, the roundtables we've had. But obviously that has to continue in City Hall, and there does have to be a way to build community and build community-based planning. It's the work I've done all my life. I look forward to continuing that conversation. And I just want to say that I do believe at the end of the day that we will challenge people to think differently about how we can invest in our city to build this city bigger and stronger. I do not bet against this city, never have. I grew up in Washington Heights. When you grow up uptown in Washington Heights, you don't go downtown, you go to the Bronx. And whether it's Fordham Road or Kennedy High School, the lifetime of learning from kids from all different backgrounds has had a tremendous impact on me. I told you about my mom, but my stepfather, Carlos Cuevas, was the former deputy borough president of the Bronx at a time when people thought the Bronx was left for dead. And I knew at an early age that was not going to happen because of the great traditions of this county, this borough. So have a great night tonight. I guess it's up to Dianne and Art to close it down. And I look forward to seeing you all at a different time. Thank you. And thanks for letting me go, guys. I appreciate it.
Well,
Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thanks, Mona.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Have a good evening. All right. So we'll go now to Ms. Morales, the same question on the housing crisis and rental assistance and how we can help people stay in their homes.
Sure. Thank you so much for this really important question. So I think, I'm going to answer this in a couple of different ways. I think the first thing that we need to do is to address the homelessness crisis. Our city lacks right now the political and the moral courage and commitment to actually addressing the homelessness crisis. We have enough vacancies across the city that if we wanted to move forward and say, we're going to house everyone, we could in fact do that. And let me tell you what that looks like. That looks like reclaiming and repurposing vacant hotel spaces. That looks like reclaiming luxury vacant apartments that are sitting unused and that have been sitting unused as tax shelters for the wealthy. It means being flexible, allowing flexible zoning in spaces right now that might be zoned as commercial and making changes to those types of spaces. Those are some of the things that we can do in terms of the immediate crisis. Over the long term, we need to invest in actually a fundamentally different model for housing. For too long, the way housing and the housing market in New York City operates has been based on a profit-driven, developer-centered model that puts them in the driver's seat and the profits that they make in the driver's seat. We actually need to adopt a model that centers and prioritizes our communities and that lets communities lead and invests all of the tax subsidies and the tax rebates that currently go to developers, invest those dollars in communities so that we are in fact increasing community land trust, building social housing and cooperative housing so that everyone has access to housing. The other thing I'll say is in terms of the current crisis, we do need to cancel the rent and we need to cancel the mortgage for small homeowners. It is time for the big banks to actually pay their fair share and absorb the costs of this crisis right now. We've seen over the last 12 months that what the tax relief efforts have done in terms of growing the stock market, growing Wall Street, and growing the number of billionaires that actually live in our state. It's time for them to reinvest in our communities. So I would move to have those rents and those mortgages permanently canceled. And then we also need to provide supports to small homeowners to cover other expenses, including tax relief to them as well. Those are some of the things that we can do to move forward.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chang.
Well, the first thing I want to do is actually think about the size of the problem. We have a city of about 8.5 million people. The median household income is about $69,000. We clearly have an income problem. We have about 950,000 units of stabilized housing, much of which is substandard. We have about 640,000 people in NYCHA housing who are living in places that were designed for 420,000 people in substandard conditions. That's the problem. The 200,000 cases pending in eviction court is roughly equivalent to the population of Boston. And then when you look at when you put those pieces together, 100,000 people who are homeless, and you put the pieces together, we have a low-income housing problem that is absolutely massive. And so even before we get into the issue of feeding from low-income housing to homelessness, well, I don't know why the mayor isn't acting like his hair is on fire about this, because we are pushing hundreds of thousands of people toward the brink of bankruptcy through these moratorium with no plan to end it. And I have a plan to do that. Right now, we need to have an eviction moratorium that goes out till 2022. We need a foreclosure moratorium that goes out to 2022. And this has to apply to small businesses as well, because small businesses and tenants, these are the things that constitute our community fabric. And then we can go to the banks and the financial institutions and say, we need to extend the mortgages to create a payment-free period. And when we do that, we create an opportunity to actually zero out the rent, zero out the mortgage payments, and allow that rent to be, those built-up debts to be canceled. Now, there's some missing pieces here. A lot of these landlords, as was mentioned before, are Black and brown landlords. They're doing just what generations of white folks have done before, which is to build wealth by investing in real estate. We are undermining that growth in our neighborhoods. Now, a lot of those folks have zero debt because that's how they work. A lot of them have 20% debt. So we need to think about, well, how we act more creatively with things like the property taxes and other costs to be able to minimize that. And I'll just make one final point before I go on. And this has to do with how we need to vastly increase the supply of low-income housing. And we're going to do that by vastly increasing the amount of property that the city owns. The city actually, when a property goes into tax default, when it goes into tax arrears, the city has the first lien position on that property, which means that if it goes into foreclosure, the city has the right to take it over first, so we can keep people in their houses and we negotiate with the banks directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to Mona.
Thank you. And thank you again to Ms. Morales and Mr. Chang for being with us this evening. So the next topic that we're going to touch on is education, or as I call the Department of Education, the big black hole. Now, today we do have a special guest because as a parent that's been active in the school system, I think that it's important that we hear from who I call the real stakeholders, which are the students. So at today's mayoral forum, we have a high school senior, Umar Conde, from Capital Prep Harlem High School, who is going to open the education part of the forum. Young Mr. Conde has some questions for you, Ms. Morales, and you, Mr. Chang. So Umar, you can unmute yourself, introduce yourself, your school, and start asking your questions.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Omar Conde, and I'm a high school senior at Capital Prep Harlem. And my first question is some background. Like, there's been like a huge impact on the mental health of students in New York City, and like, what is your take on like us going back to school? So like, yeah, that's the first question, and then after I have another one.
Who do you want to answer that question first, Umar?
Dianne Morales.
Okay. So, you know, there was an educators forum last week. There was a mayoral forum for educators last week, and focus was on Black students. And there was a question about this very same thing. And my take on that is that we have done our students so much harm. You know, before the COVID-19 pandemic, the Department of Education has failed Black and Brown students so much, and now we've just compounded that. So I really think that we need to focus on healing with our students and creating spaces for them with trusted, credible staff for them to begin to do some healing before we actually push and focus on, you know, trying to deal with the academic deficits. We know that we can't learn if we're not feeling safe and our students aren't feeling heard and seen and valued. And the bottom line is that part of the reason why our education system fails so much is because it is so embedded and so deeply rooted in racist structures and systems. And so we need to really focus on making sure that we bring in people that look like our young people and that love our young people. Because as Malcolm X has said, you can't teach someone if you don't love someone. And so we need to really make sure that our children, our young people are feeling like they are loved, seen, valued, and respected and taken care of before we can actually begin the art of teaching. Because I think, you know, actually teaching is a beautiful thing and should be a beautiful thing rather than the oppressive structure that exists right now. And there's a lot of different ways that we could talk about healing. You know, healing takes a lot of different ways. There's art therapies, there's talk therapies, but we really actually need to take care of our young people and our students before we can think about doing anything else. And that would be one of the things I would want us to prioritize.
Shall I go next?
Yeah, thank you.
Terrific. Well, as you will hear around education, there's so many wonderful things that Dianne says, and I agree with so many of them. So thank you, Dianne, for that. I'm going to actually go in a slightly different direction and talk really about the need in our school system and then what partnership really means. So we have right now about actually less than 1 million students right now because people have moved out of the city because of COVID. And as a result, we're going to have declining tax revenues, which is going to be a really per capita problem for a lot of schools who are going to have to return that money. We have about 300,000 students who have an IEP, and the number of students who have a learning difference is certainly much larger than that. We have about 30,000 students who actually are homeless, and then another 10,000 who are in juvenile. And so when we look at the actual problem, the exception is actually more the rule. And when we add in the burdens of what happens with COVID, we are certainly in a situation where the exception is the rule. What is normal now is the problem with education. It's not actually being educated. So this whole discourse around getting students back, how do they catch up? It's very premature. We need to focus on getting students so they regain their self-esteem. They feel comfortable back in the schools. They feel safe. They see a pathway for moving on. And for students in high school in particular, this is not something that can be imposed top down. You deserve a say. You know, if you are a high school senior, you are going to be voting. And so you are actually going to have a say in our system. And you need to be able to express your opinion about what needs to happen. And then, by the way, why is there a one-size-fits-all school for everybody? Why doesn't the school adapt to each student based upon their strengths and their needs? I think we can do that. But now is the time to have that conversation and get rid of this 100-year-old system that Dianne and I often talk about as being outmoded. We need to move on into a 21st century system that can adapt to the changes in technology, the changes in the workplace, focus on giving students what they need, the confidence, the ability to learn on their own, the ability to make mistakes and recover from it, and then be equipped to go out into the world and having this kind of access. And why don't we actually then further integrate the high schools with CUNY? So if you happen to have strengths, you're doing AP courses, why aren't you taking them at CUNY and starting to build your college CV already and couple it with workforce development? Because we have so many students in high school who need to start working. So why don't we have a system for high school that allows them to work and go to school? Maybe it's not 12 years of school, maybe it's 14 years of school. But why do we have a system that penalizes them for doing that? We need to embrace them and support them and give them opportunities to grow like the kids who are the wealthy kids.
All right, thank you. So my second question relates to all like the student athletes in New York City, and I myself is like as a student athlete, play football. So some context is like there's 62 counties in New York. 57 of the 62 counties have sports. The 5 counties that are being left out are the counties in New York City. Why don't we have sports? Like, why are our futures being sacrificed? And I just want to know like what do we do wrong? Like, on the behalf of every student athlete in New York City that deserves to have a season and that deserves to be able to play the sport that we love, so we can use it as a tool to succeed in life. Why are we being left out?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay. To me, this is all about that top-down system. One size fits all. There's only one solution for every student in New York City. And I feel for you. My son was the co-captain of his JV basketball team at Brooklyn Tech. He made the varsity team, and he was slated to become co-captain of his varsity team this year, his senior year. He's missing out on that. It's a terrible thing because it's bonding, it's belonging, it is who you are. And when you carry that sense of accomplishment, it carries you so far. Because I know I was a student athlete too. So why don't we actually have pods of students who pledge to self-quarantine together, to create safe zones, to promise to do these things, where there's on the honor system without verification from the coaches and others, and then play in a much more safe way. I mean, if the NBA can do it, I think we can do it a little bit. So why not? So I think there's a lot that can be done to actually, and this doesn't pertain just to athletes, this pertains to people who are musicians, who are actors, who do theater, who do debate. Why isn't there debate, for God's sake? Right? These are activities that are fundamental to the high school experience, and we need to be creative. The city owes an obligation to you students to be creative with your partnership to figure out how we can get this done.
I have a follow-up question from Mr. Chang. If you were the mayor right now, what would you do differently in like trying to help this New York City student athletes like get seasons and play our senior seasons?
Well, the first thing I'd do is I'd talk to y'all, because you guys have ideas. You know how important this is. If it is this important to you, what are you willing to commit to? As I mentioned earlier in this, I don't think COVID is going away this year. I think the risks are going to go on for another year or two. And if that's the case, we need your partnership. So the place I would start are the student athletes. Because if you are willing to commit to quarantine, to do all the things that are safe, to emulate the NBA and their successful seasons, and then we have a lot of things to talk about. But if you're not, and you are going to do the things that some of the NBA athletes have done and sneak off campus and do something that you're not supposed to, and then we're going to have an issue. You know what I mean? Because our health is so important. Your health is so important to your future. So it means that we're all going to have to step up. You're going to have to assume more responsibility. We're going to have to assume more responsibility. And then, by the way, we need to figure out how to restructure the PSAL. Man, that thing is just holding us back. It has been an arbitrary, governance body on high school sports. We need to figure out how to reform it so we can actually move our sports forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Ms. Morales, you're up.
Thank you, Omar. So, the first thing that I thought about when you asked the question was all schools are not equal in the Department of Education in New York City, actually. It's not true that not all schools don't have sports and access to the things that you're talking about. This is a question of equity and justice, because there are schools in certain communities, in certain zip codes that actually have plenty of sports. And have that available to them, and have facilities or have arrangements or agreements or partnerships with places where they get their students access to facilities. So this is an equity and justice issue. And we have to start there. We have to start by ensuring that all of our students in the New York City school system have access to the same resources and the same opportunities. And that might look different in one place versus the other, but they should all have access to it, right? It should be a choice that you get to make, not a choice that is made for you. In terms of, do you want me to answer your second question too?
Yeah, I have a different follow-up question for you.
Oh, you have a different follow. Okay, all right. Okay.
So like you were saying, yeah, like I'm familiar with like schools that like Catholic schools of New York, like Cardinal Hayes High School, Iona Prep, Stepinac. Those all of these schools have seasons, and they have had like 7-on-7 season. They've been able to get together with their teammates, and like it's all like brotherhood, and they've been able to bond and play with their teammates. So if you were the mayor right now, like what would you do with the PSAL students, like from like John F. Kennedy, Mahaven, like all these different schools? What would you do differently with them to like just make us all equal?
So, I think the resources question is a critical one, right? Ensuring that students and schools all have access to the same resources in order to be able to play, to have teams, to whatever that is. I'm not sure what the difference is that you're talking. Is there a difference happening right now between some of those schools and your school that you're referring to?
Yes, there is. So like schools in the PSAL, like John F. Kennedy, Erasmus Hall, like these schools do not they haven't been with their teammates since I say like January of last year. Okay. But how opposed to schools like Cardinal, like these Catholic schools like Cardinal Hayes, Stepinac and stuff, like they've been together, like they've been working out. Yeah, yep. They've been like playing 7-on-7 seasons, and they're also getting ready for a season next month.
Got you. So I think, some of what Art mentioned before is spot on in terms of working to problem solve with you all as students, right? To figure out what things, what discipline and sacrifices you're willing to make, right? Because if we want to be able to let you all play, then that might mean that you might need to commit to quarantining, to limiting certain sort of activities and behaviors, so that we know that you're going to be able to be safe with your teammates, right? Because the top thing has to be containing the public health issue, right? And the public health crisis. But we also know that there are ways to do that that enable people to still have interactions, right? And so that might mean needing to test on a regular basis, right? To test the players on a regular basis and have you guys commit to that, to have you guys committing to being part of your own sort of, pods in terms of who you're interacting with. and to make sure that you are actually checking all of the protocols in terms of safety, so that you then have the freedom to pursue this thing that is so important to you. And that it is actually, I believe, a critical part of education, right? Education is not just, or should not just be, math, science, and reading. Education is the experiences that you get to have with other young people along the way. It's arts, it's sports, it's all of those things that are part of that process. And so being able to engage in that, I believe, is not just a social thing and a physical thing, but it also contributes to development, your brain's development in a whole different kind of way. And we need to provide opportunities, especially for adolescents, high school students, because what is happening during these years for you all is critical in terms of who you'll become. And so we should be creating pathways to make that possible for you. And we should be working with your families to help make that happen. We should be working with the school administrators and with the teams to work out a plan to make that feasible and achievable for everybody in a safe way.
Thank you for those passionate answers. Ms. Davis, back to you.
Thank you, Omar.
So no, thank you so very much. Great questions from Omar Conde from Capital Prep Harlem High School. I just want to add also to what Art was saying about high schools having partnerships with the colleges and the community colleges, and just add that at Capital Prep Harlem, their students actually take, juniors and seniors like Omar, actually take college classes at Hostos. So, and it would be great if more schools, more high schools throughout the city did the same. So we are nearing our 7 o'clock time. So we're going to continue on with closing remarks, and we'll start with you, Ms. Morales.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to have this relatively intimate conversation. It's really been refreshing, and I've really appreciated it. So I'm not a career politician. My candidacy is 100% rooted in a grassroots people's movement that is reflective of New Yorkers who are ready to forge a new social contract for this city. I've spent my entire life working with those who are seeking to live in dignity and provide for their families. I'm not beholden to the political establishment. My personal and my professional experiences made me aware of the systemic and structural barriers that work to prevent true equity and justice for so many of our Black and Brown communities. I've taken on the Department of Education to secure critical services for both of my children who have IEPs. I navigated the hospital system in order to obtain reasonable mental health services for my daughter. And I have called out publicly the NYPD for profiling and assaulting my son. I got into this race because the combination of my lived and professional experiences has never been reflected in our city's leadership. A year ago, I thought that would be an important factor in moving the city towards better representation of historically marginalized communities. But now, after living through the intersection of the COVID pandemic with the racial justice and the economic pandemics that existed long before that, it feels like there's a moral imperative for us to shift how we operate and who and how New York City is led moving forward. We're living in an unprecedented time that calls for radical reimagining of what is possible. It's critical that our leadership be reflective and representative of those of us who have struggled the most, not those who are tied to the old ways of operating. We need leadership that's unapologetic about the need for us to center and elevate our communities. I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo. We're at a crossroads here, and there's a moral and political imperative that to recognize our collective interdependence and prioritize everyone's ability to live in dignity. I'm running for mayor because I believe that I am ready to tackle the root causes of these problems. I'm not promising to get New York back to normal. I'm not promising to get New York back to normal. I am promising to build a New York City that has never existed, one that can finally live up to the rhetoric of being the greatest city in the world. Thank you so much for this opportunity tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Mr. Chang?
Well, first, I want to thank all of you. Mona, Meimuna, Mohammed, thank you so much for doing this. What a huge effort. I also want to thank Dianne, because Dianne and I often end up being the last people speaking because we have the endurance to be here with all of you. So thanks, my hat's off to Dianne, so thank you. I want to just say that the next mayor, really needs to be thinking very far ahead. Education is the future. Reinventing the housing is the future. Thinking differently about how we handle pandemics and prepare for it is the future. And I want to tell you that my horizon for the future is 80 years from now, when the seas will rise by 10 feet, inundating the land where hundreds of thousands of homes are, overwhelming our airports, all of our wastewater treatment plants, our electrical plants, potentially infiltrating our water supply. And is 80 years from now too far away to start thinking about this? I don't think so. So what we're doing here is actually talking not only about how we solve the immediate problems, but with an eye toward a future where New York City will come back, and it will come back with more equity, more fairness, and the ability to sustain the changes that are going to come. As you know, I talked about my 40-year career. From Queens West, I learned how to build the city from the sewers to the street, to provide universal broadband, and to prepare our city for the climate crises to come. From CUNY, the Brooklyn Public Library, and Brooklyn Tech, I learned how to create an education system that meets every student where they are, from LD to specialized high schools and to the workforce. From Safe Horizon and Case Commons, I learned to integrate and coordinate vital government services. I co-created the only web-based technology system for child welfare, the system of record in the state of Indiana. And as a co-creator of NYC Votes, I learned how to strengthen our city's democracy for the future of people like Omar. I'll go back to a quote that I love from Albert Einstein. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking used to, that caused them. And hats off to Dianne for also not coming from that same place. But I want to say it is a matter of experience, actually having transformed things. What I promise is that as your mayor, I will bring that different thinking to work every day to make our city a better place. And we're going to do it together. It's not because I have all the ideas, but we're going to work bottom up with the families, the communities, and the people of this city to actually understand and embrace these ideas for the future of New York. Thank you so much. I invite everyone to come to my open office hours. I have Zoom open office hours every day, 7 days a week. You can sign up right on my website at chang.nyc. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chang. And Ms. Morales, if you could tell our viewers your website as well.
Thank you so much for that opportunity. Our website is at www.dianne, D-I-A-N-N-E, don't forget the second N, .nyc. And all of my social media handles are Dianne, the number 4, NYC. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Chang, just your social media handles as well, please.
Oh, they vary on site to site. So
okay,
they're not as good as Dianne's.
Okay, well, we for our viewers, this week we will be posting our Meet the Candidate interviews with the mayoral candidates that are participating in the forum. So the one with Mr. Chang, you'll see, and you'll also be able to get his information as well. And we'll post it on the website for all of the candidates. I'm going to have Mr. Mardah close out our group one.
Well, thank you very much, Mona, and thank you, Diana and Mr. Chang, for staying with us this evening. We appreciate your time and all the information that you have given us. I think our community is better for it, for hearing, what you have in store for us, and we appreciate your time. So once again, thank you for joining us this evening, and we look forward to more conversations in the future.
Thank
Back
you.
to you, Muna, and we will get ready for the next round of candidates.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So for our viewers, we're going to start the part 2 of our candidate forum. The candidates are coming on. Group 2 is Ms. Joycelyn Taylor, Ms. Quanda Francis. We're waiting on up. Here we are. Mr. Ray McGuire, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. And Eric Adams, who should also be joining us shortly. So, but thank you to everyone who joined us since 5:30 and was with us for group 1. I'm going to get the introductions started and get the program started, and when Mr. Adams signs on, he'll be able to also introduce himself. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to Little Africa Bronx News' Mayoral Candidates Forum. My name is Meimuna Davids. I am the founder and the publisher of Little Africa Bronx News. Little Africa Bronx News is a project of social impact strategies. Just for some background, I am originally South African, born in South Africa, raised in Bed-Stuy, been here for almost 40 years. I am a Brooklyn transplant to Co-op City in the Bronx. Been in the Bronx for a little over 10 years now. I'm joined this evening with my co-host, Mr. Mohammed Mardah, who is the chairman of the African Advisory Council. Mr. Mardah, if you could please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Mona, once again, and thank you, our wonderful leaders, for joining us this evening. My name is Mohammed Mardah, and I am the chairman of the African Advisory Council, which is a group that was formed by Ruben Diaz to be a liaison between elected officials and the African community here, particularly in the Bronx, but generally in New York City, as one of the most underserved communities in the city. We felt it's important for us to engage with elected officials, and a result of that engagement is the African Advisory Council, which has been one of the leading groups in New York City that has really impacted on the African community. And if you're looking to engage Africans in New York City, look no further than the African Advisory Council, and I happen to be the chair right now. And I'm also the CEO of Africans Help Desk, which is something that I created with my partner, Ms. Grace Imo. And at the Africans Help Desk, what we do is exactly what the name says, Africans Help Desk. So we try to help as many Africans as possible with any issues they have. And so if any of your offices, would like to engage with us, check out our website, www.africanshelpdesk.com, and you get to see some of the services and issues that we tackle. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I look forward to this wonderful conversation. Back to you, Mona.
Thank you, Mr. Mardah. And I'd also like to introduce Maimuna Davids. If you could please introduce yourself.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Maimuna Davids. I am the Communications Director and Editor for Little Africa Bronx News, as well as Social Impact Strategies. I am a recent graduate, class of 2020. And I am so glad to be here joined with all of you to be able to discuss these topics this evening. I will be in charge of the time this evening. When Mona discusses the run of show, she'll explain to you again. Everyone gets 3 minutes to answer the questions that are given to you. Roundabout when you reach 30 seconds left, I will raise up a 3 to give you your 30-second warning. And then when your time is up, I will simply raise a T to show that your time is up. Please abide by the time allocated for the questions.
And also joining us this evening is a young man, a high school senior at Capital Prep Harlem High School, Mr. Omar Conde, who will be asking the candidates education questions. Omar, could you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Omar Conde. I'm a senior student athlete at Capital Prep Harlem High School. Yeah, and I'll be asking the education questions. So.
Thank you, Omar. So we're going to get started. Again, I want to welcome the candidates for joining us today, Ms. Quanda Francis, Ms. Joycelyn Taylor, Mr. Ray McGuire, Mr. Eric Adams, as well as our viewers. Little Africa Bronx News has launched this civic engagement and political engagement initiative to keep the African community informed about matters that that affect us. And clearly these municipal elections, the mayoral election, controller, public advocate, city council, it's really important that we as a community become civically engaged. And I want to thank the candidates again for joining us today. We know it is Super Bowl Friday. Also, Omar, who is a football athlete, for being here today. You know, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to engage with our community. And I will now hand it over to Mr. Mardah, who will continue with the introductions.
Well, thank you very much, Mona. So I guess we've all heard the round of show. And so each candidate would have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and tell us why we should vote for them to become the next mayor of New York City. And we will start with Mr. Eric Adams, followed by Ms. Taylor, then Mr. Ray McGuire, and finally Ms. Quanda Francis, in that order. So Mr. Eric Adams.
I just want to get my stop clock going so I can make sure I comply with the rules. You know, thank you so much for hosting this, and it's extremely important. This journey did not start today or this year. This has been a journey for over 20-something years, and actually over 42 years. From the time that I was arrested in South Jamaica, Queens, my brother and I were beaten badly by police officers. And I still think my brother is going through psychological issues today because of that. Although I was bitter and bruised and angry, a group of civil rights activists came to me after Arthur Miller was killed by a chokehold by police officers. And they asked me to join the police department. And when I did that, I started an organization called 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. And we fought for reform for 22 years in the police department. But I learned something else in the process. I went in with some unique skills. I was a computer programmer, and I was able to become a police officer special assignment and use technology to look at how to deal with crime in our city, particularly when you look at a place like the Bronx. We were having extremely high crime all over the city. We were experiencing almost 2,000 homicides a year, 98,000 robberies. Our city was under siege. Every other car had a no radio sign. We used to have these things called Benzie boxes. But we were able to use technology to reverse that trend. And our police department has a long way to go, but bringing our city to a safer place was important. That was a pivotal moment for our city. If every agency in this city would have moved to a real-time governing model, we would be living in a different city right now. Our city is dysfunctional. We create our crises. People talk about a tale of two cities. We're the author. One agency creates a crisis and another agency responds to that crisis. Just looking at the Department of Education, it creates our criminal justice crisis. The mere fact that 80% of the men and women at Rikers Island don't have a high school diploma, equivalency diploma, and almost 30% are dyslexic. We also create our health crisis. 70% of 12-year-olds in the city have early signs of heart disease because of the food we serve our children in school every day and other agencies. And we create our education crisis. We just have education wrong. It shouldn't be K through 12. It should be prenatal through career, where we're making sure that mothers, when they're carrying their children, are receiving the right nutrition so our children will have the right start in life. If you go agency by agency, let me tell you what you are going to find. You're going to find taxpayers' dollars are being wasted by those that believe they're trust funds and not trusted elected officials. As mayor, I'm going to turn that around and have an efficient city that won't create inequalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Ms. Taylor?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank Mona, Mohammed, and the Little Africa Bronx Network for including me in this forum. My name is Joycelyn Taylor, and I am running to become the 110th mayor of New York City, as well as the first Black woman to hold the position of mayor in the city of New York. I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, in Pink Houses, which is a NYCHA development in East New York. I've gone to public school here. I've worked for the State Division of Housing. I attended college right here in Brooklyn at LIU, and I've gone to work for Fortune 500 companies. I've also had the opportunity to work as a small business owner with the city of New York. And if you're a minority business owner, you know how challenging that is. As someone who has lived in this city all my life, I love this city. From the Yankees to the Mets, from the Knicks to the Nets, this is my city. And I'm running to become mayor of this city because, quite frankly, I'm tired. I'm tired of the excuses and I'm tired of the inaction. We have found every way to legislatively tie our hands and keep government from doing the right thing by people. Every day, the everyday citizens of this city are doing their part. They're investing in this city every day. And it's time for us to ensure that they start to see a return on that investment. Every policy, law, and procedure that has been implemented in this city was done by an ordinary man or woman who was doing the best they could with the information they had at the time. But in this moment, a lot of those policies are not working. They're actually helping to create inequity and struggle. They are the systems that do not work to support people and allow people to be lifted up and live a purposeful life. So I'm running for mayor because whether you believe in God, spirit, Allah, you know, they created heavens and earth. We took it, we created food insecurity, we created homelessness, a failing education system, and a climate crisis. If we want to change those things, we can. But it's going to take someone who's willing to say and do the hard things, someone who knows firsthand the lived experiences of everyday New Yorkers. We have to have leadership in the city that won't fight, but will work together to get New York where it needs to be. And that's to a place of inclusiveness and transparency. We need a mayor who's going to be hardworking, who has compassion, and who has common sense. And that person is me, and that's why I'm running to be mayor of the greatest city in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Ray McGuire.
How are you, sir? It's great to see you, Miss Mona and the others from Little Africa. I will tell you that I have spent time on the continent in South Africa over my years, making certain that I could help South African businesses and businesses on the continent grow and survive and be there for the future. That's a little bit of what I've done. Let me tell you who I am. Who I am is I come from Dayton, Ohio, in the Midwest part of this country. I was raised by a single mother who was a social worker. I didn't know my dad, and my mother, along with my grandparents, raised me and my two brothers. And based on her sacrifices, at 16, I left my home and I took a Greyhound bus around New England looking for education. And I landed at a school in Connecticut and did pretty well there. And then I went on to apply to colleges, and I was fortunate to get into Harvard College, went on to Harvard College and Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. And I came to New York with three things. I came to New York with a great education, a lot of debt, and no money. And New York has been great to me. It's where I met my wife and where we were raising our three children, Leo, who is 8, Ella, who's 18, and Cole, who is recently drafted into the NBA and is now the starting point guard for the Orlando Magic. And this city's been great to me. I've been able to come here and compete at the highest levels and kick down doors for Black and brown folks to make sure that while I may have been the first, that I certainly wasn't the last. And so I take my lived experiences, just how I grew up in the foundation, which is rock solid. And I take what I've been able to accomplish in business, where I have managed budgets that are often larger than state budgets, billions of dollars of budgets, and leading and managing from the depth of financial crisis. I've been able to negotiate transactions that are north of $650 billion. And so I know how to run businesses. And in so doing, I've invested in Black and brown communities, either institutionally or personally. Today, this city is facing three crises. It's a crisis of COVID, it's a crisis of the economy, it's a crisis of racial and religious segregation. And so now is a time when it's important for me to take my lived experiences, the experiences I've had in business, leading and managing large, complex budgets, and also the relationships that I've developed to bring this city together. I'm the only person who has all of those three. And so what is my plan? My vision is what I call the greatest and most inclusive and necessary economic comeback in the history of this great city. We're facing these crises and we need to have a remedy. And I've written about the systemic inequities that have existed in healthcare, in education, in the economy, in the criminal justice system. If there's anybody who has the relationships, who has the experience to be able to address these and address them immediately in this crisis, it is me. So what I've done to outline, and you can go to rayformayor.com to see my plan for the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback. No jobs, no city, no jobs, no dignity. And it's outlined along the following: immediate financial support for the struggling small businesses, streamlining permits, getting inspections done and approval to help these businesses remove and open quickly. Number 2 is I want to get a wage subsidy to 50,000 small businesses. They're the breadline, they're the foundation of this city. 1 out of 3 today is down. I want to create a major infrastructure program to put people to work, fixing the fractured bridges and the sewage mains, and making sure that we have truly affordable housing, and then making certain that we invest in infrastructure so that our kids have access to broadband. And I work with the unions to ensure that we have good wages and benefits. And then I want to target job training that gets more New Yorkers the skills they need to get good jobs. And along the way, I want to make certain that I take care of our children and make certain that we have affordable childcare for all. And all these programs, this vision, I will kick off in the first 100 days. My economic plan is go big, go small, go forward, focusing on small businesses, focusing on infrastructure, focusing on Black and brown communities to make certain that they're included in ways that they haven't been included, in ways that I've written about, in ways that I personally and institutionally focus on changing. And that's why I'm running for mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGuire. Our next, and certainly not the last, Miss Francis, Quanda Francis. Excuse me.
I'd like to thank you all for having me. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Mohammed. I'd like to first start off with my platform and my vision. 8.5 million people, 5 boroughs, 1 mission to build a New York City that works for everyone. And my experience with New York City has been a mixed bag. And you know, unlike Mr. McGuire, I don't feel entitled. I don't feel entitled to go over time. I don't feel entitled, but I do feel as if New Yorkers deserve a city that works for everyone. That's just not the case. And a little bit about my background. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm married. I have 3 great children. I have a special needs son, a daughter that's getting ready to graduate from college, and one that's 21. All three of them came through the public school system, three very different environments, three very different students. All three of them, we had to travel from Brooklyn to Manhattan to District 2 in order for them to get a quality education. And that's not okay, because 20 years ago, my mother traveled with me from one district to another in order to get a quality education. And now we're at a crossroad, right? We have a leadership crisis. And we've had elected officials that have basically failed us. We have a situation where 24,000 New Yorkers have died as a result of COVID-19. And I don't believe that we would have had 24,000 deaths if we had leaders that understood how to use data in order to make sound decisions instead of decisions that are made haphazardly. And when I say sound data, I said not data that's readily available to make you look good, because in leadership, during a crisis, leadership exposes either your lack of adversity or just your sheer lack of knowledge of the scope of what you're responsible for. And for me, I like to call myself someone as a master of adversity. You know, I was a teenage mom at 17. I was born and raised in a housing development. I am still the only college graduate in my family. I was able to marry into an amazing family that was able to mentor me and guide me. And now I would like to duplicate those experiences for all New York City residents. I want to make sure that our children are no longer left behind, because again, depending on where you are and who you are, this city does not work for everyone. And I've seen that, you know, we have a lot of the candidates that have taken money from some of these same industries that are responsible for the systemic practices. So my name is Quanda Francis, and I'm would like for you to consider me as your next mayor of New York City.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Francis. Mona, are we just going to jump right into the questions?
Yes, Mr. Mardah. We are starting with the COVID-19 recovery plan.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So, so we would reverse the order of answers. So we will start with Ms. Francis, who just ended the introductions. So, what is your post-COVID-19 recovery plan? And what are your 3 priorities post-COVID? So that's the first question.
Health and safety of our New York City residents. What I'd like to do in terms of our economy is to look at how we utilize technology in a way that solves our problems. We have countries like Estonia and Portugal that have these, you know, these hackathons, and one part of my platform is to implement a sort of a chat bot system with the 311 system. So it allows individuals, we have a digital divide, but it allows individuals to, you know, utilize text messaging in order to just get, you know, questions, to frequently asked questions regarding COVID-19. You know, frankly, we have an information infrastructure issue where people in the most vulnerable and marginalized communities are not getting the information that they need and the time period that they need it in order to make sound decisions. So in implementing these sort of quick, you know, responses to these questions like, you know, where do I get a COVID-19, you know, vaccine? You know, am I eligible? You know, where can I receive rapid testing? You know, what are the side effects? These are all questions that a lot of individuals in marginalized communities have right now, and they're not being answered. So we have to ensure that our most vulnerable communities get the information that they need when they need it in order to make the best decision for them and their families.
Thank you very much, So same question, Mr. Ray McGuire.
Your question is my top three priorities?
Yes, and what is your post-COVID-19 recovery plan for New York City?
So my top three priorities, as I've outlined, the first priority is jobs, it's the economy. We find ourselves in an economic crisis. We have more than 1 million people out of work. We have people who are food insecure, which means that they're hungry. And we need to begin to address this by getting people jobs. We need to grow the economy. So my first priority is the economy, no jobs, no city, no jobs, no dignity, which is my go big, go small, go forward plan to create 500,000 jobs and rebuild the economy so that it's the most inclusive economy that the city's ever seen. The second is to focus on safety, security, and quality of life. Right now, we don't have that. We need to restructure when it comes to quality of life for Black and brown people. We need to restructure and reallocate the dollars out of the NYPD to make sure they go into the community organizations like the mental health care professionals and the community organizations. And my last priority, all of them are equally as important as education. We need to get our kids educated. Pre-K is fine, but we need to start before then. My plan there is what's called cradle to career or cradle to job. Make sure that every child in New York can read by the end of the 3rd grade. I want to be held accountable for that, and to make sure that every child by the end they graduate, by when they graduate, that they can either go into a career for which they will have had a summer job, and or they can go into a 2 or 4 year college. And those are my priorities post-COVID. Before COVID, my priority is to get healthcare into our neighborhoods and to get people vaccinated.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. McGuire. Ms. Taylor, same question.
Thank you so much. You know, the thing about it is the government asks for the citizens of this city to stay home due to the pandemic. So as mayor, my priority is to make sure that we ensure that people are made whole because they had to stay home due to the pandemic. So what my priorities will be, one, and first and foremost, will be housing. We have to ensure eviction moratorium is not enough. We have to ensure that people not put in a position of having to fight to continue to stay in their homes. How I want to do that is by providing grants for landlords with the option to provide rental forgiveness for the tenants. That'll ensure that landlords are able to invest and maintain their homes, and also taking the burden off of tenants about worrying about being evicted. It's not enough to just provide them with legal services. We need to provide them with support. The other thing that will be a priority is education, because we've seen through this COVID how the education system, even though we spend $30 billion, is a failure to perform. We have to ensure that going forward, every student in this city has technology. It's 2021. When you go to the 1st grade, you should have a piece of technology. When you go to middle school, you should have another piece of technology. When you get to high school, you should get a fresh piece of technology. This is how kids operate in this days. This is a technological world. And we have to ensure that we take it a step further and not just provide the technology, but let's make sure that they have the Wi-Fi capability, whether that's via a hotspot or whatever it is that we need to do. We have to be proactive. If we could spend $337,000 a year to house an inmate in Rikers, we can invest in education in a way that gives us better outcomes. And the last area that I want to ensure that we support is our small business partners. Because as a small business owner, I know the challenges that small businesses were facing in the city even prior to this pandemic. So we need to ensure that the city is spending $22 billion on the procurement of goods and services. Let's ensure that the diversity of those dollars going into the pot matches how those dollars are spent. Let's get rid of a lot of the bureaucracy that has caused small businesses to be out of business even prior to this pandemic. And let's lift up small businesses, because we know that they're the backbone of communities. They're the ones that hire locally. They're the ones that support the communities when they need support.
Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Adams.
Thank you. Good question. And what I want to spend the next few months really explaining to New Yorkers, imagine you're a pilot and you're walking into the cockpit of a plane that you're about to fly. without any of your instruments, without any of your dials or information. You're flying blindly. That's how we run our city. We're running our city blindly. So the first thing I'm going to do in the first 60 days with all of my commissioners, they're going to clearly define their mission. They're going to make sure their mission is tied into the overall mission of the city. And then thirdly, and most importantly, they're going to make sure that no action of an agency is in conflict with the mission of another agency. Then we're going to make sure we clearly use all of our agencies to move in one direction, and that is to deal with some clear directions on how to get our city back up and running. Standards for our corporations and our companies and our small businesses, so they won't have frivolous lawsuits if someone is exposed to COVID, by giving some clear standards. Second, we're going to get crime under control. Every time you have a shooting in the city and it's posted on Channel 5, it leads to hurting tourism and other industries. That means reinstituting the anti-crime unit to become an anti-gun unit with smarter officers, officers that understand conflict resolution and know how to have public safety and justice together. Then we're going to fight for every dime that comes from the next stimulus package, so we don't see what happened previously where big banks gave the dollars away to other large corporations and not to small businesses, with 51% of small businesses, 51 of our employees come from small businesses, so we need to shore them up. Then we're going to be immediate and partner with our friends up in Albany to come up with real rent relief. Part of the stimulus dollars should be pointed towards rent relief. Almost over 1 million people are behind in their rent. We want to make sure we can stabilize that and match it with mortgage relief, because we don't want to lose our small properties because of our small property owners are going to be displaced. The goal is to finally use a city that is functioning in real time, that is in alignment with each other, and not what we are witnessing right now in the city of New York. Like all big cities across America, we are in conflict, we are in dysfunction, and the inefficiencies are creating the inequalities, and in many cases, the injustices that we're seeing.
All right. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mona, for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mardah. So as the candidates can see and our viewers can see, we have a special guest here, a young man, high school senior from Capital Prep Harlem High School, Omar Conde. And Omar is going to be asking the candidates some education and youth-related questions. As I say, when it comes to education, I'm very passionate about it, but I also believe that we should also listen to the real stakeholders, which are the students. So we're going to now begin the education part of the forum, and Omar is going to ask the candidates the first two questions, and then we'll continue with the rest of our education questions. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. My first question is there's been a huge impact on the mental health of students in New York City. So what is your take on on us going back to school, fully going back to school in the buildings?
Yeah. What I will say is that my campaign, we didn't wait for me to get elected. We've already started New York City Mental Health and Wellness Youth Corner. We have thousands of high school seniors that we're working with. We created a support group. I'm glad you play football. I had Curtis Samuel do an event. He's a native of Brooklyn, to come back and give some words of encouragement to just our students, because they're going through a very, very difficult time. We've launched what we are considering to be the largest education migration back to the historical Black colleges. And basically what that looks like is, our high school seniors, of course, a lot of them have said, hey, we've lost a lot in terms of our last year, and we don't feel like we're prepared So what my campaign has done is started to reach out to a number of the presidents, not just of historical Black colleges, because everything is about pairing each student in the right academic environment so they can be successful, but also in terms of their mental health and wellness, they need to be in an environment where people are going to be supportive of them culturally, understand their plight. And we have a disconnect right now, and allowing a student to be placed in an environment that is not going to be best suited for them could be the difference between them, completing that college degree or, not going at all or dropping out. So we've already started kind of working with high school seniors, pairing them with mentors all around the country, and just listening to them and trying to figure out best how to support them in this particular space that we're in.
Thank you. Miss Joycelyn Taylor, you can go next.
Thank you so much. And as a football player, thank you so much for taking your time out tonight on Super Bowl Sunday to be part of this. I'm admiring you right now. You inspire me because I know it's a huge sacrifice. But the thing about it for me as it relates to the students is that this is an unprecedented time. And one of the things that I don't want to do is to treat this situation as like it's one size fits all. It's not. But we have to be aware of the fact that this has caused mental health challenges for so many, not just the students. And we have to provide the support and the resources that students need in order to be made whole. And we have to listen to them, because if we want the students to feel as though that they matter, we can't just come up with these ideas on our own and want to implement it. We have to hear from you guys firsthand what it is that you want to see. How can we best support you? Because you haven't gone through this before and we haven't gone through this before. But one of the things we can do is make sure when we do go back to school that we have the resources there and available for you to utilize them should you need them. So be that counselors, be that, additional assistance with, high school who may have, applications that they needed to complete. They're starting to look at colleges. We have to make sure that we provide you with all of the resources that you need. And we have to make sure that we are very strategic and we're very intentional about the way that we support you so that we can obtain a positive result for you
all. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, good luck to you and your career. Yesterday, I joined a group of coaches and players to state we need to open our schools and allow organized sports to continue. I believe it is really unjust and unfair that all over the state and the other counties, we're allowing organized sports to take place, and we're not doing it in New York City. And in fact, in New York City, we're allowing private schools to do it, but not the public school system. That is wrong. And we need to let our children play, both for emotionally and physically needs that must be addressed. Second, I think our schools should be open based on the science. If the numbers are clear that the numbers are down inside the school, we should allow the school to be open to allow our children to get the mental and emotional support that they deserve. And there may be some parents who state they don't want their children to go to school during this time. Then let's give them the options that they deserve. And by doing that, we should have the best remote learning in this entire country. Right now, it's not. The countless number of children don't have access to the technology that they need. That's why I did not vote in favor of in continuing the franchise agreement for those who were supposed to be giving us Wi-Fi. I think we need to move in a new direction because we're not getting it right. And lastly, we need to get education right. I've said this over and over again, and you're going to hear throughout this campaign, people talk about that school is K through 12. That is just not true. And we need to start going where the science is. The science is clear. The first beginning points of education, I say the first classroom is in a mother's womb. In the first 4 weeks of life, a child has 10,000 brain cells. In 24 weeks, that child has 10 billion brain cells. And the development of those brain cells depends on the nutrition of that mother. If that baby is not getting the right iron, the right folic acid, the right iodine, that child can be born with irreversible issues around cognitive issues, learning disabilities, and other issues. If we don't stop this disjointedness of education, we need to ensure that mothers have doulas so that we could have excellent pre-K programs, excellent K through 12, and excellent college. And the curriculum should be created by those who are in careers. And we need to stop feeling as though school is within the four walls of a building. We need to open our entire city to the educational experience. That includes internships, that includes visiting a museum and other places. Lack of exposure is creating the lack of true education.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you very much. You know, it's personal to me. Let me first talk to you as a student athlete. I too, yesterday was in the Bronx on two occasions. One, I talked to the players there. I talked to Coach Joe Loda and Pastor Balin and others who were convened there in the Bronx, talking about making certain that our student athletes could return to the playing field, return to the court. I was a student athlete, and I know the importance of athleticism to you and what you do. And I would encourage you to continue that. And while you continue that, what I told the students yesterday and what I'm telling you is I'm interested in you doing really well in your career, but I'm also interested in you getting to the point where you own the team in whichever field you decide to compete in. So that's my ultimate goal. I also yesterday was with Willie Colon, the great football player, and we walked around his neighborhood and we saw the kind of investment that he was making. He was an athlete, he was a student athlete, and now he's a highly successful business person. If there's a goal that you have, it is a goal to mimic, to learn from his example. When it comes to being in the classroom, you need to be in the classroom the same way that you need to be on the field and on the court. And so that gives you the tools that you're going to need to go and experience life and compete in life the way that you've competed up to this point. Compete in life. Education is fundamental, and today so many of our kids, including you, have been held back because you're not in the classroom. It, yes, needs to be focused on being COVID protocol appropriate, but we need to get you back in the school. And when it comes to being outside of the school in a digital world, we need to make sure that they have access to broadband. And I'm proud because I sit on the board of the New York Public Library. And one of the things that we've been able to do is to get Wi-Fi into the branches so that our kids can go and do homework, giving Wi-Fi access. So education is fundamental. We need to have it. We need to focus on it. You need to be in the classroom. We need to take care of you. We need to take care of your coaches. We need to invest in you so that you become the new standard of excellence for us. So keep doing what you're doing.
All right, thank you, everyone. Some of you have already touched up on my second question. There's 62 counties in the state of New York. 57 of the 62 have sports. The 5 counties that are being left out are the counties of New York City. And I'm speaking on the behalf of like all the student athletes in New York City. We want to know, why don't we have sports? Like, why are our futures being sacrificed? And like, what are we doing wrong as student athletes? Ms. Francis?
I don't think it's anything that you're doing wrong. This is the reason why I'm running for mayor. This is not a New York City that works for everyone. And I've said, and I'll keep saying this, the lack of investment in our communities is the reason why, is one of the reasons why we have these spikes in crime. And if we invest in you, whether you want to be a student athlete, whether you want to be a scientist, whether you want to be an accountant, if we actually invest in you, we will have a New York City that works for everyone. So that's why I've said, like, I'm action oriented. I did not wait to get elected. I've already started the process of connecting students in New York City with resources outside of New York City. Ironically, I am the Global Community Development honoree for the largest magazine donated to recognizing the accomplishments of women in banking and finance on the continent. So, I'm connecting resources, students with resources outside of New York City, outside of the United States, because we need to have an intentional effort to ensure that our students are able to get ahead. And everyone should be invested in this election. Because if New York doesn't make it, there are ramifications that will not just be felt here in New York City. It's going to be felt in Los Angeles. It's going to be felt around the world. The interconnectedness of this moment and our economies shows that we cannot just continue to elect people that have visions with no plans on how to implement those visions. Talking points are great, but how? How are you going to pay for it? Everything that I've rolled out so far, these comprehensive plans that I have, they're plans that come with a way to actually pay for them and a path forward in terms of bringing New York City into the 21st century. Building a second bridge for cyclists, that's right next to the Brooklyn Bridge. I honestly don't understand, why we have a crumbling infrastructure, why we have, a situation where our students don't have, access to sports. We have recreational deserts, we have food deserts. My plan for RED, is well, we'll come back to that acronym again, but I'll respect the time and say that I've already invested in you, and I will continue to do so.
All right, thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Omar. And let me just tell you this, you're not doing anything wrong, just like Ms. Francis just said. And I don't want you to feel that you're doing anything wrong or that you're being punished. And I want you to understand and know that I hear you and I understand your frustration, because as a student athlete, many of you are relying on those athletic scholarships for college, right? And depending upon what year you're in, this year could be pretty critical for you. So I understand that. But let me just say this to you as mayor, and hopefully by the time I am mayor, we won't be in this similar type of situation. But here's what I would have done. I would have looked at what other people in, the sports field are doing and see how we could replicate it. We don't have to try to reinvent the wheel. We know that, professional athletes are finding ways to still be able to have games with smaller audiences or no audience at all. So what can we do? We have to be proactive about making sure that we support everyone in this city, and what can we do in a proactive manner. That's what I would have done as mayor, because I understand how important it is for student athletes. And going forward, I think the best way to help is to be mindful of the consequences of all of the decisions that we make. I get it. We're in a pandemic. It's an unprecedented time. But the goal of the government and the job of government is to come up with solutions. So going forward, know that you will be heard. Know that I will be speaking to you and coming up with solutions so we can create the scenario that we want to see and make sure that we don't put you in another precarious position. You're already behind as it relates to education. We should have worked with the schools to ensure that we can find ways to still have these games go through. They're doing it within the movie industry, right? They test the people who are going to work on set to make sure that they're COVID free. They put different protocols in place. We're doing it on a smaller scale with restaurants, like people have masks. So there's ways to do it, and that's what I would have done. And let's hope that going forward, we come up with those kind of solutions that create better outcomes.
All right, I have a follow-up question for you, Ms. Taylor. As someone that like you just said that if you were the mayor, that you would replicate like different states that are like playing football. Do you believe that the city officials that are elected now should have a plan for us to play in the coming months?
I think that they should be working on a plan. We have to be able to walk and chew gum. It's just like the rolling out of the vaccines, right? We're in this situation, but it's up to us in leadership positions to come up with the solutions. So hopefully behind the scenes, they're coming up with plans and figuring out ways to be able to support the athletes going forward. But I do believe that that's their role and responsibility in this moment to come up with those solutions.
All right, thank you. Mr. Adams?
Yeah, thank you so much. young man, I start my day every day with a quote. Doesn't matter what happened in the game, it's what happens in the entire season. I received that from my Little League coach. And so you missing the ability to play is more than just the exercise part of it, which is crucial, particularly since we see the obesity rates increasing in our city. You're also missing the shaping of the philosophies that are important in life. I'm sure, Ray, as a former athlete, would tell you that the skills you acquire being on a team, understanding the ups and downs, knowing the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, not being able to close a deal, all of those moments are taught in an athletic experience. It doesn't matter if you go to the pros, if you play in college, the planting of your character is being developed now through sports. I'm sure that all of us would tell you how many times we had to be resilient because things did not turn out the way we want. We must get sports back. And I said that yesterday with the group of coaches, and I'm going to continue to say that. It's going to deal with the social, emotional development as you develop your full personhood. It's going to deal with the real mental health crises that we are facing as a city. A report just came out of children, young people dealing with suicidal tendencies and thoughts. We must get it back. And I am reaching out to the mayor and the governor and say we can't treat our city differently. And this is down to the mayor. The rule was handed down that each municipality will determine how the programs will be put back in place. You can't say it's okay to have contact sports in the basketball and professional arena, but it's not okay for our pupils. I don't accept that. I don't agree with it. We must have a full sports program back in our schools, and that is something that I stood for then, and I stand for it now as well.
Thank you. Mr. McGuire?
Yeah, let me respond to that the way I would one of my children. I'm assuming that the following is taking place. I'm going to address what you have done wrong, which is nothing, but I'm assuming the following is taking place. I'm assuming that whatever gym you can get to or whatever outdoor facility you can get to, that you're staying in shape, that you're taking care of yourself. I'm assuming also is that, as Eric says, you're eating right, so the diet is right, and that you are listening to your coach. Because I've invested here in programs to make certain that you all, who are the athletes for the future, get the right nourishment and get the right training, and listening to your coach and making certain that you continue to interact with your teammates, which is going to be so important. So you haven't done anything wrong. I'm assuming you're doing all those things right. And one thing that you should understand as an athlete, as a student athlete, championships are won when no one is looking. Championships are won when no one is looking. So go forward and make certain you take care of you. You haven't done anything wrong. You are the product of a system now that has reflected inequities with respect to this community for years. Just so happens now in the crisis of COVID, those inequities, those injustices are being amplified. They're being put on Front Street so that you see them. And what we as leaders need to make certain that we do is to make certain that you get the opportunity. And if the opportunity doesn't happen in the next few months, then we need to make certain that we somehow get you the opportunity to go exercise and to perform in front of these college coaches so that you get the opportunity that many of us had to get to where we are because of athletics.
All right, Mr. McGuire, I have a follow-up question. As the father of a student athlete, like, you know about the recruiting process and you know how important like a season is like to us. So if you were elected, if you were in the mayor right now, what would you be doing differently than the elected officials are doing right now to assure that that the student athletes of New York City are getting what they deserve, and which is their seasons?
So this is exactly what I do. I would make sure that I got all the healthcare professionals together to outline COVID protocol. I would get all the coaches together to understand the COVID protocol. I would get all the athletes together to make certain that they understood the COVID protocol and make sure that they got the opportunities to play. I would also touch base with the coaches and the athletic directors of the schools that you'd like to attend and make sure that they gave the opportunity to work out, to demonstrate that you had the skills. And I would do that day one.
Yeah, thank you. And I also like to say thank you to all of you for investing your time into the youth. And thank you, Mr. Adams and Mr. McGuire, for attending the protest yesterday. I've been fighting this cause I'm a part of the About You NYC, and I've been fighting this cause for like a good minute now. And I was at the protest yesterday, so thank you for coming out and showing your support. Student
Respect, man. Keep doing you. We need you, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, you're the future.
Back to you, Ms. Davids. You're on mute.
You're on mute. You know it's hard to mute, Mona.
Yes. Yes. No, thank you, Omar. He's a football athlete, like Ms. Taylor said, but he is here with us while the Super Bowl is going on. So that tells you his commitment. So thank you to him, and thank you to his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Quanda, who are originally from Guinea, for allowing their son to participate and to advocate for students throughout the 5 boroughs. So thank you again. So we're going to continue. I just have 2 additional education questions, and then we'll continue with the other topics. And I know that time is running. So continuing with education, the Department of Education has a $30 billion budget with a B. I always say B. But when it comes to the educational outcomes of our students, they are sorely lacking. Each and every year, a supermajority of our students, Black and Latino students, do not read, write, or do math at grade level. We have the lowest proficiency rates here in the Bronx. We have a term called not 62 because we're always 62 when it comes to many things, including proficiency rates. With the Department of Education right now, if you were mayor, how would you hold the Department of Education more accountable for the educational outcomes of our students and for the graduation rates? And when I say graduation rates, that's also iffy because a lot of our students, and we see the headlines every year, students are graduating illiterate and illiterate. So I'm going to get this question started with Mr. McGuire. How would you hold the Department of Education accountable?
This is, as I started out, education is my ticket here. I am so humbled by the sacrifices of my mother to make certain that I had an education. I was the only one in my college to graduate or go to college and graduate. So education is key. The accountability means that we got to work with the Department of Education. You identified a budget of $30 billion, which is one of the highest budgets that exists anywhere in the country, likely the highest. We spend $25,000 per student. Challenge is less than $10,000 gets to the principal in the classroom, which is where we need to start. We need to make sure that the principal has the resources and has the tools that are necessary to make certain that the teachers in the school have what they need that's necessary to educate our children. There is a triangle, which is the teacher, the parent, a child giver, and the child. And that triangle has been breached. I can remember along the way, teachers who made a huge difference in my life and the principals of those schools who led those teachers. And I talked to Mrs. Dakota Keys in Brooklyn the other day and talked about what she needed as resources for principals. And so we need to make certain that the resources that we have in that budget that you're right, starts with a B, that those resources actually get to the kids, that we demand, and I would demand quality education so that the determinants of zip code should not determine the kind of education that we get. And today they do. And I would ensure and hold the Department of Education accountable for making certain that each of these zip codes had the highest quality education and not let some educational deserts exist. We know where they are. And all the people who've talked up to this point about what we're going to do, we've gone backwards. K through 8 that you cited our proficiency rates, 67%, probably 70% below proficient. And so we need to make certain that we invest in these children. We need to make certain that we invest in them early. And as I said early on, I want to make certain by the end of the 3rd grade, every child in New York City can read and do math, because between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, they're learning to read. After that, they're reading to learn. And if they never learn to read, we know the social status and the social cycle that's been created intergenerationally. That's how I would hold the Department of Education accountable, working with the department to make certain that the principals and the quality of education got into each zip code.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Ms. Taylor?
Thank you so much. And, you know, I would want to say this, that when we talk about the accountability, it is accountability on the part of Department of Education. But much like Mr. McGuire said, you know, the accountability just doesn't lie with the Department of Education. We have to start having conversations and bringing the parents, the students, and the education system together. We have to work together to ensure that all of our goals are in line. And if we want to get to Z, what's the A, B, C, D, E that we need to get us to that Z? You know, we have a policy of no kids left behind, but the reality of the situation is that some kids need to be left behind, and that needs to be okay. We need to leave them behind and give them the support they need, because if we don't, when we get further down the line, we've created a bigger problem. And then what I also want to do is this, is that we have so many communities where education is working well. What are those communities receiving? What are they doing that they are seeing success? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's invest in communities at equal levels. We want to talk about equity. We talk about equity all the time. Invest in communities at equal levels and you will get the same results. So part of my plan is to make sure that we invest in schools in every community in an equitable manner, because that's where we're going to see a positive return on that investment. That we include parents in the process with the understanding that sometimes these parents also need support. You know, if you didn't have a good education system yourself, how is it that you're going to be able as a parent to even support your child? So let's provide support on all levels for the teachers, for the principals, for the students, and for the parents.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Adams?
You know, thank you for that. I'll say it over and over again. If you don't educate, you will incarcerate. That is why you see 80% of the young men and women on Rikers Island don't have a high school diploma or an equivalency diploma. If you don't educate, you will incarcerate. And here's a real hidden secret. New York City does not have an education problem. It has a Black and brown children education problem. 65% of Black and brown children don't meet proficiency every year. You can't tell me if any other ethnic group in this city was not reaching proficiency at those numbers, they would be rioting in the street. Try taking one class away from some schools and see the response. We have turned our backs on Black and brown children. But if we want to get this right, we have to handle it on all of the levels. Number one, I'm going to keep going back. I'm encouraging everyone to read the book, The First 1,000 Days of Life. And those 1,000 days do not start when the baby is born. Once you do that, you will understand how our children are starting off already with 2.5 strikes against them. Second, we need to really look into our educational system. The pre-K, it can't be just babysitting. It must be the continuation of stimulating that child and making sure what they get in brain development. 80% of a child's brain grows in the first 1,000 days of life. We need to show mothers how to participate and fathers how to participate in that brain development, that brain growth that becomes the foundation of instruction. Third, in our schools themselves, we need to be clear Children must see images that is reflective of them. We need to look at all of these books that we are having our children read. We must have a better nutrition, healthy food, make sure that they're not creating the crises that we continue to create. And we must have our careers play a role in the curriculum and instructions. Because remember, we spend $350,000 a year in education, in a lifetime for a child. Where's it going? But we do it so young people can be, one, start their own business or be in a career. So then we need to have people who will be doing the hiring play the role in what should be teaching in the schools and stop disconnecting our educational system.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Ms. Francis?
Yeah, so I would like to just say that I agree with everything the three of you have said. And I would like to take it a step further and basically say it's about the right environment. Like I have three different children with three different learning styles, and the three of them went to three different schools. And there was a reason for that, because they had different learning styles. And I think that we really need to reimagine education. I will keep saying this, we're educating our students like we're sending them to work in a factory. They're not being prepared for 21st century careers. But so when we talk about illiteracy, or we talk about, students that are dropping out, or students that are entering the criminal justice system, as I said, I see individuals that have dropped out of high school, but they're contributing to $900 billion in losses for banks in terms of financial crimes. So how is it that they're able to develop such a sophisticated area of knowledge, but here it is, the education system is not the right environment for them, or they're failing based upon the skills that is being introduced to them. The career and technical schools have a higher graduation rate for Black and brown students than other high schools. And the reason for that is because students are paired with their interests. So I have talked about introducing artificial intelligence and machine recommendation systems into the curriculum, because there is no one size fit all. And I do agree with the fact, that we have, I don't believe we have a triangle, I think we have four. And we have a vehicle right now, administrators, students, principals, and parents. And right now, it's for a vehicle to go forward or back, for a vehicle to go forward, the wheels have to be moving in the same direction. And right now, that's not happening, right? Students, parents, administrators are looking at education from a bird's eye view, 30,000 feet in the air, and everything looks the same from up there. If you're in an airplane and you're looking down, the ground all looks the same. That's how some of them are viewing education, but that's based on the resources that they have. But if we're able to look at each student and determine what their learning styles are, then we can start having a conversation about intentional education. Right? Education that introduces, coding to children before, by the second grade. Other countries are doing it. So.
Thank you, Ms. Francis. And actually, we're gonna continue on with our next topic, looking at the time, which is small business and economic development for New York City. And I'm going to pass that over to my co-host, Mr. Mardah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mona. So the question is, we all know what COVID has done to our small businesses here in the city. And so what are your plans for, helping small businesses in New York City recover from this COVID crisis? And up first is Ms. Quanda Francis.
My plan is to look at the data. I've spoke to a lot of small business owners, and I want to create a situation where they thrive, not just survive. I work for the Small Business Administration, where I helped small business owners all around the country recover from natural disasters. And it starts with assessing their needs. But right now, our elected officials don't have the right environment. They don't have the business ecosystem in New York City is broken. So at this juncture, everything that the government does affects a business's, business environment. And so we have things like, closures and, small businesses just not getting the support that they need. We need to start looking at specific industries and seeing how we can pair larger larger corporations with small business owners to kind of create a system in which our, our Amazons or our very large Fortune 500 companies are now giving some sort of lifelines to our small business owners, kind of creating an ecosystem of opportunities, because we know that, Wall Street, a lot of companies are still doing well, but our small business owners, on the other hand, are really suffering. So I feel like allowing, larger corporations to assist small business owners in some sort of in some sort of kind of interconnected way will benefit small business owners in the long run. But it starts with, again, identifying their needs and looking at the data. And right now, I don't even see any data in terms of, the government, elected officials knowing how many small business owners are closing their doors every day. Like there's not enough data. And right now, it's like we're asking all of these questions, right? But we don't ask, doctors don't operate without first diagnosing a problem. And this is what we are right now. We're at this juncture where there's just, there's no diagnosis of the problem. We're not looking at data, right? And I'm not talking about just actual data. I'm talking about data, information, data that is creating information that derives knowledge, not just data, right? Because, someone can put data in front of me and I look at this and say, okay, well, what can I use this for? Is this meaningful, right? So, in order for the government, in order for large industries to help small business owners, we need to understand their needs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Same question, Mr. McGuire.
Sorry, this is an area that is essential to the recovery and what I call my comeback plan. And that's no jobs, no city, no jobs, no dignity. And what that focuses on, we do have the data. There are 200 and some odd thousand small businesses. We know that 1 of every 3 is now down and may never come back. My comeback plan, which is the most inclusive in the history of the city, includes focusing on small businesses. And what does that mean in specific? I want to have 50,000 small businesses, 50,000 of the 200 and some odd thousand small businesses here. And the first thing I want to do is give them wage subsidies, which means that I want to pay 50% of their salary for 1 year. Number 2, I want to make sure that the sales tax receipts that they receive, that they generate in 1 year, that they keep those sales tax receipts. Number 3, I want to make certain that they get concessions on their utilities and on their rent. Talking to Con Edison, and as I talk to small business owners, which I did yesterday, walking around the Bronx, throughout the Bronx and talking to the small business owners, I want to make certain that they have to pay Con Edison 100 cents on the dollar and they make 10 cents on the dollar if they're making anything. And I want to intercede and negotiate relief between them and utilities and also between them and their landlords. Then I want to make certain that I focus on their credit scores. And when I focus on the credit scores, I want to give them a credit holiday so that their ability to access credit is not influenced negatively by COVID. And then I want to make certain that I invest in what I call the comeback bank, the banks, the local CDFIs working with the BIDs, the bids in each one of these boroughs. And I want to create a fund that has a financing, $50 million of financing, so that they do one of 3 things. They can give grants, they can give low interest loans, or they can give equity to make certain that these small businesses survive. Small businesses are the core to this city. And my plan addresses directly exactly what is needed. And given the history that I've had in business, funding and getting capital into small businesses, personally and institutionally, I know how to do this. It's going to require public-private partnerships. It's going to require the government using its resources, but it's also going to require the private sector getting involved here. so that we can give a lifeline to those small businesses so that they survive, so that the city can survive. So my plan is outlined in detail, including how we pay for it. Go small. That's the most important part of the economic recovery, which I have outlined, which I have the proven leadership and management skills to get done. I've negotiated over $650 billion worth of deals. I've managed budgets that are larger than most state budgets. I've invested in small businesses, creating large numbers of Black and brown entrepreneurs who are surviving today. And I know how to get this done because I have a history of having done it.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGuire. Ms. Taylor?
Thank you so much. Listen, the reality of the situation is this. Prior to the pandemic, many of the small businesses were struggling, especially the small businesses that were trying to do business with the city of New York. A lot of them were utilizing their credit and their financing to do the city projects. When this pandemic happened, what did we do? We turned around and asked them to borrow more money during the pandemic in order to keep their business sustainable. And that just wasn't a good thing to do because it actually exacerbated the situation. Because now you have small businesses who weren't able to open, and now they're dealing with the fact that a lot of these loans that they took will not be provided as grants, and they'll have to pay them back. So we took small businesses and actually put them in a worse position than they were before. So what do we need to do to fix that? We need to provide small businesses with actual grants and opportunities to be able to keep their businesses and make sure that they're sustainable. We have to provide opportunities. The city spends $22 billion on the procurement of services. We have to expand their circle of, how they're able to do business. We have to create opportunities for small businesses to do business with the city of New York. But in doing that, we have to create a program that allows them to actually be successful. What does that look like? That looks like not having a graduated deposit program and not building the city on the dollars of people who could afford it the least. I feel like it's discriminatory in nature when the city asks a small business to go borrow money to do their project. If the city wants to do a project, they have to be able to finance it. So let's develop a graduated deposit program so that we're not again asking small businesses who can do business with the city, because they don't need capacity, they have capability. Let's do a graduated deposit program. The other thing we can do is that we can ensure and improve the payment process, because the city has been culpable in putting a lot of small businesses out of business. A lot of firms have waited years while their payments are stuck in auditing due to Directive 7. And we have to look at these laws and policies that we have in place and the bureaucracy that we have in place that actually is in place at the detriment of business. So that's what I want to do. I want to look how we can support businesses, not put them in a position of borrowing additional funds, and how we can do what we need to do to ensure that they're successful. We got to ensure that the diversity, and we talk about equity all the time. We want equity. Let's ensure that the diversity of the funds that go into the pot match how those funds are spent.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Adams.
Thank you. And yes, it's clear that 51% of our employees in this city come from small businesses or micro businesses. Sometimes we ignore that. So there are a couple of things that we can do. Number one, Ms. Taylor is 100% correct. We need to look at our procurement rules and how we are procuring goods and services. I will institute a real-time system. Every year we talk about that we didn't hit our benchmarks. Out of the billions of dollars, we procure everything from Xerox paper to cleaning supplies in hospitals to even PPEs during this pandemic. We talk about that we don't reach the benchmark because we wait until the end of the year and do an analysis. We need a real-time system to show exactly how all of our agencies are procuring their goods and services, and we can right-size them during the year, not waiting until the end of the year. Second, we need to empower our chambers. Give our chambers the dollars they need to do the backroom administrative work for our small businesses. Countless number of days are spent each month trying to figure out all the rules and regulations that a small business must do. Let's take that off their plates, and that will put dollars right back into business. Third, we need to make sure that our small businesses have access to capital. That's one of the number one things I hear we need. As Ray stated, we need a local banking network. Our CDFI, something like True Fund, which has done an amazing job really empowering our small businesses how to have access to capital. Next, let's be clear about this. It costs too much to do business in this city. The bureaucracy of too many companies, too many agencies are doing everything they can to hurt a business. And the big mistake we're making is not telling our agencies from the Department of Consumer Affairs and others, we're not judging you on how many citations you hand out. We're going to judge you on how many businesses you help sustain. We must be tied together in the goal. And that's why I say we must have every agency's mission must be tied into the mission of the city. And so when you have this disjointed attitude that it makes no difference to me if you're able to open your restaurant or not, or if you're able to get the FDNY to do an inspection for a sprinkler system and it takes a year to do so, that's a disconnected system that hurts our ability to hire, hurts our ability to have a low-skilled, low education individuals to feed into the tax pool. We need to stop that. This needs to be a city that at one time you crossed the George Washington Bridge and it was welcome to the Empire State, not destroying empires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. Back to you, Mona.
Thank you, Mr. Mardah. So we're coming up at 8:23, and even though we'd like to get to the other topics, that's not going to happen today. But for our viewers on Little Africa Bronx News, our Meet the Candidate interview series, we will be posting the individual Meet the Candidate interviews with the mayoral candidates. And the candidates in the interviews really go in depth into their policies, their platforms, and their vision for City Hall in 2022. We're going to start now with our closing remarks. And Ms. Francis, we will begin with you. Each closing remark is 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
I'd like to start off again with saying 8.5 million people, 5 boroughs, one vision, and that's to build a New York City that works for everyone. Dr. King was 39 when he was assassinated. So for all of the people that are looking and are like, oh, you're young and you can do so many other things, I am tired. And we're at this juncture where we need agile leaders, leaders that think outside of the box, and leaders that have an understanding of the plight of all New Yorkers, and not just the ones that are doing well, but the ones that are not doing well. And as an accountant, I will balance this budget, and not on the backs of the most vulnerable, but also not on the backs of the business community that is so vital to our tax revenue. I say to you, New York City, once again, 8.5 million people, 5 boroughs, one vision, and that's to build a New York City that works for everyone. My name is Quanda Francis. I'm running to become the next mayor of New York City as a mother of 3, as a native New Yorker, as a data scientist, as an MBA, as an accountant, as a researcher, as someone that's pursuing a PhD, as someone that has overcome tremendous adversity. We are in this moment and we need a transition. We need a transitional leader. We need one that is not afraid to stand up to what's wrong and anticipate what we need to do in order to, once again, build a New York City that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Francis. Ms. Taylor?
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you, Mona and Mohammed again, and Omar again for including me on this forum. Listen, we have all sat back and we've watched as our elected officials have talked in circles. They've come up with 5-year plans for 4-year terms. They know every reason why something can't happen. You know, for me, during the pandemic, there was one good thing that came out of it, is that it allowed me to spend additional time with my family. And we played a lot of games. We played Monopoly and we changed the rules of those games. We played for real money under, you know, free parking. But we talk about politics being a game, but it's time for us to end the game of politics, because we can no longer play politics with people's lives. People's lives are not a game. So the leadership in the city shouldn't be playing with the lives of people. The decisions that they make are not about politics. And it's far past time for us to start playing games. So I'm not running for office because I have political aspirations. I'm not running for office for notoriety. I'm running because this is a pivotal time. In order for us to ensure that we rebuild equitably, we have to have someone in office that understands the implications and the end results of the policies that we implement. I'm running because I know that the answers are right there in front of us. And working together, we can stop playing games and we can create the change that I think we're all ready to see, which includes investment in housing, investment in education. So I want you to know that that's my commitment to you. And I also want you to know that I'm you and the future is us. If you envision a brighter future, working together, please follow and support my campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Adams?
Thank you so much. And I want to take my hat off to your amazing timekeeper who has kept us all on point. And just thank you. I come in the spirit of the African diaspora. Last year, I remember standing on Goree Island, looking out from the door of no return, feeling the spirit of our ancestors that laid on the ocean's floor, hoping that one day we would reunite the continent of Africa and our cousins and nephews and brothers and sisters that we were departed and ripped away from many years ago. This is the 401 year of the commemoration of the African slave trade. And I borrow from the words of Marcus Garvey, "Up, you mighty people, you can be what you will." I know what we're capable of doing. And that spirit that you have of coming here, selling your wares on the streets, opening restaurants, taking every dollar you earn and ensuring that you invest in placing food on the table today and for the future of your children tomorrow. That's who I am. No one has to tell me about being a low-paid employee. I was a dishwasher paying my way through school. No one has to tell me the struggles of those who are fighting for a better tomorrow. I worked in a mailroom to help my mother pay the rent. As children, we wore and we carried a garbage bag full of clothing to school every day because we felt we were going to be thrown out. But we came together. People on the block put turkeys on the back porch to make sure we will have something on Thanksgiving. They gave us shoes for Easter. They provided for us. That's how we must come together during this difficult time. That's the type of mayor you need. One who has gone through a lot so he can help people who are going through a lot. Join me on Eric Adams 2021 and look at my 100 steps forward and see how I'm going to rebuild this city as the mayor of the city of New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. McGuire?
Thank you, LittleAfrica. I am so deeply appreciative. You know, on October the 15th, I called my 94-year-old mother, and Lord delays is coming to give us a grace on the 21st of this month. She'll be 95. I said, "Mom, I quit my job." And she said, "Boy, you have lost your mind. I thought you had a good job." And I said, "Yes, Mama, but the city that I love is now in crisis and it needs leadership." I said, "If I take my lived experiences, is how you gave me that foundation, And I take what I've been able to do in my proven leadership and management experience, managing through crises, manage through budgets, knowing how to get things done and grow businesses and advise on businesses globally, especially across the continent. And I think about the relationships I've been able to develop. And I think about the things that I've been able to do while I have been in business for young Black and brown people, young people like Omar, now in the name of Sengu Deli, who's building hospitals across Ghana, the next generation, how being able to bridge the divide. And the vision that I have of making certain that I lead the greatest and most inclusive economic comeback in this history. We got no jobs, we got nothing. No jobs, no dignity. And how I return safety, security, and quality of life, and how I focus on education in ways that I have invested through the entirety of my career to make a difference in folks' lives. You know, I didn't get termed out. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for a promotion. I'm looking to take all the things that I've had and lead this great city forward. If you're interested, I look forward to having your support at ravefrommayor.com. Come with me on this journey and make certain that our future is at least as bright as our past, especially for Black and brown people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire, and thank you to all of our candidates that joined us this evening. Ms. Francis, Ms. Taylor, Mr. McGuire, Mr. Adams. I'm going to have Mr. Mardah say his closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mona, and thank you to our aspiring mayors to be. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to more conversations. And I certainly look forward to seeing the videos of your individual presentations from Little Africa Bronx News. And on that note, have a good evening. And again, good luck to all of you. And I look forward to more conversations like of this one. Thank you, Mona. And thank you to all our candidates.
Thank you. Take care.
Respect.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys. It's good
Night.
to see all of you.
Same here. Thank you. Good night.
Go get them, Omar.
Thank you.
Thank you.